Welcome everybody to the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board meeting of trustees. Unfortunately, tonight we'll start off due to the tragedy that occurred earlier today at Abundant Life with a moment of silence. So if you would, please stand and observe how you can. We are holding this in the Village Hall, the meeting is also on Zoom. There's a Zoom link at the top of the agenda. With that, we have a quorum. The agenda was properly posted, and we'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda, we have public appearances. So this is public's opportunity to provide feedback to the board. If you are from the public, we just wish you share your name, your address, your municipality, and hold your comments to no more than 3 minutes in case we have a number of folks who would like to speak, which it appears we do tonight based on the number of forms that are already up here. Again, due to the open meeting laws, it's not a dialogue, it's not an exchange, unfortunately. We're listening, it's your opportunity to provide feedback, and we can't really cover anything that's not specific to the agenda later on as well. So with that, please be respectful. And again, I'll start calling off names with the forms we do have, and then we also, I'm sure, have some folks on Zoom that would like to speak. First, we have John Hogan. John, you want to come up, push the button that looks like a little thing, and let us know your thoughts.
Is there one? All right. Thank you, committee. My name is John Hogan. I'm a 12-year resident of the village. I'm also a public member of the Community Development Authority for about the past 8 years. Plus, I was also a member of the Ad Hoc Housing Task Force. The goal of the Housing Task Force was to develop strategies to close the known gap in affordable housing in the village. Many strategies were considered and recommended, but the key word was affordable. As you consider the new spending priorities before the village board, including the new police and fire station, a new pump station, higher costs for a full-time fire department and others, plus on the agenda today, a new library, the board must consider this question. Will adding this new expenditure make housing in the village more or less affordable? I think the answer is obvious, but this is a lens through which new spending should be judged. Raising the cost to stay in one's home impacts the most vulnerable, who were the focus of the housing affordability project. Senior citizens who are on a fixed income, and those who wish to live in the community who can't afford the burden of additional costs. Furthermore, the Community Development Authority, in conducting a SWOT analysis as part of its work to develop the comprehensive plan for the village, it was documented as a threat that higher taxes were an impediment to families and businesses who wish to locate new to the village. Through this lens, you must also consider the question of whether adding additional expensive services at this time, such as the library, will reduce the threat of families and businesses' desire and ability to move to the villages, or will it increase the threat that families and businesses would be willing to locate here? The math is real. The cost of these projects, plus the coming substantial tax increases brought on us by the school district, all constitute an elevated threat to not only new families and business attraction, but to existing family and business retention. I urge you to consider the impact of these financial decisions in light of these previous goals and threats identified by the village. Thank you. I've distributed my comments as well.
Thanks, John. Next then wishes to speak, Abby McDowell. Did I get that right, Abby?
Good evening. My name is Abby McDowell. I'm the homeowner at 208 Heather Drive. I'm here today to express my concerns regarding the proposed rezoning of the parcels in question for the construction of a new lift station behind my property. As one of the homes directly impacted, I am strongly opposed to the rezoning for several reasons. First, approving the rezoning would open the door for new developments behind the Arrowwood neighborhood. Currently, the only access to and from the neighborhood is via Taylor Street and Ridge Road. Before considering rezoning any new developments, it is essential to plan for an additional access road to ensure safe and effective traffic flow. The intersection at Wellbridge, Highway N, and Taylor Street is already congested during peak hours, and adding more traffic from a new development would only exacerbate the situation. While improvements like bump outs and updated crosswalks may help slow the traffic flow at this intersection, they won't solve the major congestion issues caused by a new development. Has a traffic study been conducted, and if so, when can we see the results? Why are we investing tax dollars into construction at this intersection when we will likely need to revisit it once a development is moved forward and put in place? If you drive through other neighborhoods in Cottage Grove, you'll see that each of them has at least 2 access roads in and out. Moving forward with a $6.78 million lift station now seems premature without addressing this critical access issue. Additionally, I want to highlight a point that made during the Planning Commission meeting. The new lift station was compared to the one on Vilas Road. However, the Vilas Road lift station is situated away from residences by a field and wetlands, whereas the proposed new lift station will be located right on the property line of the residential area. While the village engineer assured us that the noise level wouldn't be an issue, we need to remember that there are different factors at play here. The Vilas Road lift station doesn't have neighbors in close proximity. Ours will. I call for an environmental noise assessment for the proposed lift station to measure decibel and vibration levels. It appears that our elected officials are moving quickly to approve projects like this one without conducting more thorough research or fully considering the long-term effects. While notifying only residents within 400 feet of the proposed development may meet the legal requirements, it feels deceptive. This is a major residential project that could have substantial impact on our infrastructure, schools, roads, sewer systems, traffic, and other community services. Every resident in the Arrowwood and Wellbridge neighborhoods deserve to be informed. We should expect better communication and work together as a community to find thoughtful, well-planned solutions rather than approving development for the sake of development. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Abby. Next, then we have Rick Smith wishes to speak. Rick?
I'm not half as prepared as my gracious neighbors are.
Please, yeah, the little, looks like a person talking, the little rings on it. There you go.
I'm not as gracious as my neighbors here and can't express myself fluidly, but it has become, me and my wife Tina have been at 100 Heather Drive for 30 years. And it's like my neighbors say, it's a beautiful community. We enjoy it. And we don't mind development. But when it comes at the scale, at this caliber, that these people are bringing on with no way out of the village, where you're talking NN, I just don't see it sustaining. The developer came in too early without a traffic study, and that they have to research that. And like neighbors said, environmental, I think they paid way too much for what they're gonna get and gonna squeeze every nickel out of it that he can. So, and I don't trust the address where he's from. I don't trust, he's only been in business for 5 years, and I wish him luck somewhere else, but not here in our backyard. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Rick. Next, then we have JP. Oh, there he is. And you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good evening. JP Vicencio at 702 Wheelbridge Road. I'm here to speak to the library and ask that the board move the project towards referendum. So I'll be honest, I was a little dismayed when I saw the architectural report and the showing that, you know, a remodel that we were hoping would be a very cost-effective way was not truly feasible, and that building a new building would be in our best interest. And really, as I thought about that more, I came to the realization that there are quite a few benefits to that. The efficiencies that include utilities, maintenance, insurance, and then warranties. But I was really curious about what was the financial impact. So I actually took Cameron's financial plan and put it in a spreadsheet, and then ran it past Cindy, worked with her on that, and Cameron even took a look at it as well and sent it to you all. And what I found is that this is still actually a very reasonable project. In fact, there's a very likely potential, or good potential, that our overall net taxes could go down based off of the capital campaign and potential grants that we have out there. And that's within a 5-year outlook. So, for example, even at the highest end, if we only were to raise $1 million from the capital campaign, the average 5-year tax would be $130. To put that in perspective, that is well within the range that your residents filled out in the survey back in June that they would be willing to pay for a new service. And that was 52% of respondents who spoke on behalf of that, or filled out the survey in favor of that. So, but again, we have the potential with that state grant that was mentioned in the last board meeting, the WEDC grants, and in fact, as part of the WEDC application process for that, Cindy heard from them that they would be willing to even consider us for additional grants. So there's a lot of money potential that's out there that would actually make this project help us reduce village taxes moving forward. Combine that with being in a centralized location, connected with the bike ped plan, the multi-use trail going around BB, as well as the proposed connection between the community park and then BB, this all kind of fits really together, and this could be a cornerstone piece for the idea of a downtown area along BB. And so, like I said, I really urge you all to please put this in front of the voters. Allow them to make a decision, because based on all the information we have, there are no red flags. It is well within the responses that you have received from the survey that they're willing to pay for this. So at the end of the day, let's let them decide and move it forward to a referendum. Thank you.
Thanks, JP. Next up, wishes to speak, Stefan Ciabano. Stefan. I don't know if he's here, or is he online? Okay. He wishes to speak about the library, is what he was alluding to, so. Then we had some wish to speaks that didn't want to speak, just wanted their voice heard. Vincent Wittig, again, this one was related to the library and just affordability overall for the community, and was not in favor of the library at Learning Ladder location. Emily Kutchin, again, through 203 Dock Court, village resident. Again, Emily wanted to ask the board to continue to support movement towards a referendum. Katie Moreau at 319 Southern Grange sent the entire board her notes as well, but again, strong proponent of the library at the Learning Ladder location. So, anybody else in the room wish to speak? Oh, please. We're making you get your steps.
And here's another
Oh, another one, thank you.
Christine Buss, 225 Forston Drive, 22-year resident of Cottage Grove. My comments are related to the proposed lift station, rezoning for the parcels for the proposed lift station. Number one being the two parcels. One of those parcels actually crosses Ridge Road. And just clarification on why that second parcel's needed at this time. Second item, on December 11th at the Plan Commission, the recommendation included one contingency, that being the rezoning shall take effect upon the village closing on the purchase of the land. Not really clear on tonight's agenda if the Uphoffs who own the other parcels as well in that planned development, is it an all or nothing sale on those parcels? At the meeting, the discussion that the lift station would not go through without a residential development. I'm not clear if the sale of those two parcels goes through, does this greenlight the lift station as well as the proposed development? How does that correlate? And that being the current developer is Lakewood at this time. The third item, the Ridge lift station, is been in the works for over a year. There's a schedule out there. Not sure when it was actually put together, but it has activities starting with bidding in the next 2 weeks, which would be December 30th, so 2 weeks from today. Might be outdated, but that's the only thing I could find on the agenda site. And the final item, Lakewood's presentation on December 12th, following the Plan Commission meeting, they discussed, the project costs, and then the developer said that they would be providing some of the funding. Neither the village nor the developers could recall how much that funding would be. A search I found in the 2024 long-range cash flow analysis dated September 11th, the developer contribution is $1,862,500. I found that kind of interesting that nobody recalled that amount at the time. It's about 26% of the total project cost. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Terry? I'm not reading your writing correctly, so please do your last name, sorry.
Hi, my name's Terry. Can you hear me all right?
No, you got to turn it on, please. It should be a little red light. We'll see.
All
There you
right,
go.
there you go. My name is Terry Benzo. I live up on Stony Hill Lane. I've been here 5 years or so, something like that. I think I've met most of you at one point or another, but all I got, my subject pretty basic here is I've sat in your position before more times than I can count, and I think good governance is when you take a look at what you've got to spend. Don't look at it as, oh, I've got $20 million, how am I going to spend it? But take a look at, hey, what do we need? What's essential? And what kind of money do we have to cover our needs? It doesn't mean you got to spend all 20 million if that's all you got, okay? Sooner or later, you got to pay the credit card, and that usually comes quicker than you want. So, and I think there's some rough things coming down the pike. The school mess, however it got created, it's not looking pretty. And we're not going to realize how bad that is for a while. So I'd encourage you to take your foot off the gas, step back and look at what you got. It's other people's money you're dealing with, even though some of it's yours personally, but it's other people's money. Okay? That's all I got to say. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Terry. All right, anybody else in the room or on Zoom wish to speak?
John, if I can, please.
Oh, yes, please.
Hi, my name is Troy Allen, 400 Southing Grange, 29-year resident. I guess I'm on here because of the library. I think there's been a lot of frustration on both sides. Those who want a library and the process is really moving along too slowly for them. On the other side, those who oppose it and why staff resources and taxpayer funds are being spent on it. I believe we need to take a step back and get public input, specifically a referendum asking if the library is worth $500 to $1,000 in additional tax funds that would be collected from each resident, or each household, I should say. The cost at this point has been all over the map. Even Learning Ladder has gone from a $2 million possibility to an $8 million possibility. And that doesn't include the money that's already been spent and the staff resources that have already been taken up. I think we have other priorities in the community, personally, that are probably a higher priority, public safety being one. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Troy. Anyone else on Zoom or in the room? All right. Then we'll move to discuss and consider our regular board meeting minutes from December 2nd. Any questions, comments in regards to the meeting minutes as presented?
Murphy will make the motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Then we'll move to unfinished business. First up is a presentation from Enberg Anderson regarding the Learning Ladder Building Evaluation Report.
Hi, my name is Sean Kelly. I'm with Enberg Anderson Architects. I was one of the team members that worked on the report that you have in front of you. We also then hired Spire Engineering to do a structural evaluation and JDR engineers to do a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing evaluation. The general outline of what we were doing was to better understand the condition of the building, try to prioritize the needs and for any repairs, replacements, or upgrades. Also kind of assess the usability of the building to be a library. And then at the end of the day, understand cost models that would be related to some of those findings. So my presentation today was really just to kind of summarize the executive summary that's in the documents, and then take any questions that you guys might have. I can go into anything more in depth that you'd like to. But in general, I think the big glaring error or issue that we wanted to point out was the structural concerns of the building. So a library is one of the most structurally intensive buildings that there is out there. A lot of people don't quite understand that, but concentrated book loads is a significant weight. So one of the issues we ran into when looking at the building was that the existing structure, although great for its current or its previous use, did not meet the needs of a public library, and there would need to be extensive structural amendments made to the building to make it suitable for library use. Generally, what we would have to do is the building is basically fed by all of its mechanicals from the basement. We would need to kind of remove all those from the ceiling. We would need to sister or basically double up all the joists in the building, in some areas even further. In addition to that, we would need to add about 14 columns to the basement. Depending on how we do that, that would most likely have to be hand dug, but we could, depending on how the elevator works, we might be able to make that a little bit more efficient than what we were anticipating. I'd like to point out the elevator issue. To use the basement of the level, we would have to put an elevator in the building. That's captured in the report. as well as kind of a lot of the mechanical systems are near the end of their life. Some of them could be reused, so there is some salvageability of the building. So those were kind of the main issues. The other one I wanted to point out is we would need to put a sprinkler system in the building, and that would require a new water line from the main street. The current water line to the building isn't large enough to support a sprinkler system. So those are some significant investments why in the cost models, the renovation cost was so high, is that we would have to do a lot of that messy structural upgrades, and then we still need to bring in some of the, do the existing systems. The cost models, I did want to kind of touch on that a little bit. They are cost models. So an estimate is typically based off of a real design. Like we're looking at a design. We don't have a design. We have ideas, and we have an existing building, and we have history and experience. So that's what went into the cost model. Understanding that that's a budget that we would recommend to you to proceed forward with any of the kind of three ways we looked at this building. We wanted to give you kind of an apples to apples comparison of what a renovation would be, a renovation addition, and then what happens if you would raise the building and then put a new structure on there so that you can kind of see the costs across the board. I think the one thing to note on the renovation addition, we do feel that the original building had, doesn't have a full basement, and upgrading that structure would have been, I think, a little bit easier. So keeping some of the building is an option. For the addition, we'd actually take down the newer building, try to reuse the foundations to the greatest extent possible, but then rebuild the structure to a library load. And we thought that that would be kind of a middle ground between the different options. In addition to what we did here, we also met with representatives from the library and kind of walked through the needs of your community. And we do believe your library did an amazing job. They kind of did their own research on their own, and it actually matched the stuff we did independently, which was a great kind of to come together to see that a 10,000-ish, we said 10,000 to 13,000 square foot building should meet the needs of the community for the next 10 years at least. So I do think that this was a good find as a site, but I do think that the challenges make our recommendation kind of against reusing it as is, but that maybe either a renovation or a new building on the site would make some sense. Just kind of a high-level summary of it. If I need to go into more detail, any questions you have.
Questions for Sean?
I'll go first. My first question is the cost to rebuild specific to that site, or would that cost be the cost if it was a different site?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So in my cost model, I did include in this document the cost of the Learning Ladder site as it is now. So if you would substitute a different cost in there, this is kind of a high-level look at about a 10, I think it was 11,000 square foot library is what I put in there. I think the cost of the library, the soft cost, the furniture, those could be transferred to a different site. Some of the other costs in there would depend on what the site is. I would also indicate that there could be other infrastructure costs that are not, that don't show up in this because I don't know what site we're going to.
So basically, the 1.5 million that is for the land and the, there's some other costs. But anyways, essentially with the building itself, a new building be about 6.5 million, am I understanding that right? The actual building cost?
So 3, 4. I think that would be a reasonable, a reasonable number to go with. I haven't done the math. I'm doing it quickly here.
Yeah, I understand.
You know, we are doing a 5,500 square foot building of approximately, it's one story, approximately the same construction type that we are suggesting in this. And that came in just construction costs. So you'd have to just take lines 1 and 2 at about $2.1 to $2.2 million. So taking that to 11,000 square feet, it does kind of track with the estimate that we came together.
Okay.
So that one is different. No project is the same, but that is I think a reasonable comparison.
Okay, thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about the sites and the potential for a larger building on the site and what the zoning requirements are, what you found?
Yeah, we found that you could possibly, the site is large enough where we believe you could double the size of the building in the future. So it does have a nice ability to expand as you go forward. It's a pretty sizable property. So based the building square footage to the land area would allow you the ability to expand on this current site. So that was definitely a positive for the site.
And then the new build is a one-story, so that eliminates the elevator and a lot of the other concerns with a renovation, where durability and ADA and all of the other things that we kind of talked about in our meetings.
Less critical. A single-story building is a little bit less to operate because, especially for a library, you want to staff both floors, just for security and usability of the building. So also there's vertical circulation that would be, if you look at it, we have about we have 11,000 square feet in the one-story building and 12,000 square feet in the two-story building. I think there's some efficiency where those are equivalent.
That was a question I had. So the new build is 11,000. The existing is a little over 12. Okay, and we feel like the square footage, when I go down further, it says that we need 13,400 to meet the needs. So talk a little bit about why we would not be trying to meet the needs based on that assessment.
So the work-through is kind of a guideline. It's built off of the state of Wisconsin's library planning tool. We've been doing libraries for well over 25 years, so we have honed that tool to be a little bit more, I'd say, precise. The state one is a little bit more broad. So it's a guideline. I think as long as you're within a reasonable percentage, there's factors in there that add square footage. With a single-story building, you have less fire stairs, which is part of that number. You don't have an elevator. You don't have multiple janitor's closets typically. And there's also not shaft space to deliver air. So 1,000 square feet we felt was a reasonable amount for a one-story building versus a two-story building. The 13,000 square feet is where, I forget what the exact number was, but I rounded to 13,000 square feet. One of the big numbers in there is the multiplier. This is like, architects call it circulation. Libraries also called something different circulation, but it's the efficiency of the building. So there's some play in there, which is about 25% of that number. So I would say that it is common for architects to get a program and come in a little bit less than what the size is through just good planning and efficiency with the client. At this level of it, I feel we're within a good margin of error.
Cindy touched a little bit about it, but ADA, so does this plan then includes accessibility?
Yeah, we looked at the accessibility of the site. From your approach, one of the things is we'd have to relocate the accessible stall. That's not really a huge deal in the parking lot. We would have to change some approaches. Some of the egress and entry points into the buildings don't meet code, but these are all minor and can be addressed with a very simple renovation. The elevator's a big one. That one you do need accessibility. Also, all single-use restrooms have to be accessible, which the ones in the basement are, but none of the other ones in the building met that requirement. So, yeah, none of these were really options. There's things we have to do, and any public facility should meet the highest level of accessibility, so we'd make sure about that.
So for the new build, I mean, the site improvements, is that where you're covering the Dane County stormwater management? I mean, obviously it's a 1.9 acre site.
Yep.
And there's going to be some acreage taken up for that, the parking lot. So it's a funny shaped lot when you start talking about 1.9 acres. So when you talk about doubling the size, which, you know, the 20-year plan would require something over 20,000 square feet. So have you done some sort of conceptual layouts to demonstrate that the site is feasible? Because to me, it seems really tight.
No, we haven't done any plans. We just did the math on the zoning requirements to see if you could meet that requirement. So we have worked on very tight sites, so this is a nice amount of area, but yeah, we would have to plan out where stormwater goes and look at parking, because parking would need to be expanded with a building of that size.
Yeah, I think until you were able to confirm that, I personally, when I look at the site, you look at the parking requirements, when you go to a 20,000 square foot building, stormwater management, and then the odd shape of the lot, I question whether or not that could support doubling the size. I mean, and you're saying right now, we don't know. We've taken raw numbers and we've sort of calculated that, yeah, based on this, it should be like doable.
I'm not going to give you 100% certainty on it, but I'm fairly confident it could. We've worked on tighter sites than this with more stringent requirements than this is. So I don't see that as being a limiting factor. It does need to be taken into account and looked at, but I am not personally concerned by it.
And I think if you look at the attachments, my attachment into your attachment, that outlines the library board and the facilities subcommittee list of the spaces that would go in the library. I think we match those spaces in a new build or a rebuild on that site. And that includes community space and meeting rooms and adult reading and children's and maker space and all the things that we've talked about for the last 20 years going into a
And
building.
maybe I misunderstood. You're talking about the 20-year plan versus the 10-year.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes.
And that's my next question.
Yeah. Any other?
I have another question. The cost, how confident would you feel in that, the construction cost and those estimates as far as writing a referendum question or knowing how much we actually need to ask for?
I feel generally confident through 2026, which is where my escalation factor went through on this. So this would assume escalation is typically measured to the midpoint of construction. So any project you do, regardless of a library or anything else, the general rule is if you have a year long, you go to the midpoint. That's where you should cut it off. So if you had proceeded with a referendum and design, assume design takes 6 to 9 months, depending on community engagement, which I hear that you like to do a lot of. And then construction for something like this, I'll say the 5.5 or the 5,500 square foot building is 11 months. I'd assume this would be somewhere around a year, a little over a year.
And so does this cost estimate include everything that we would need in terms of furnishings, et cetera? I mean, did you go through that with them? I mean, is that all inclusive?
I have a furniture budget in here, which is based off of libraries, what we've done. So we've used a standard square footage for that. We also put in an allowance. It's actually highlighted in red because we haven't gone through it item by item, but we took rules of thumb. This isn't a library that would this doesn't buy you everything day one, but allows you to buy it over time. And when I read the library's report that was provided, they were planning on allocating so many funds per year to improve their collections. You don't want to get all the books on it day one and then not have any room for anything else. So this allows you to get a nice size collection and then build at it over time.
Right, and so that's a requirement from the Dane County Library Standards, is to have an allocated amount every year to replace or add to your collection. And I think a question came through over email about the requirements for being part of South Central Library System, and that is a requirement from Dane County and also the states, and so we would be a part of that, and that is interlibrary loan, so you have access to the 3.2 million item collection that they have.
I guess I just have a comment and then question. I took a walkthrough of the site and, you know, I had already read the report, so that gave me a lens on what to look at. And, without that report, it sounds simplistic to turn it, you could kind of visualize the spaces. So I very much appreciate the detailed work that you did. I think it helps inform our decisions, and I think it was an important piece. So I guess then my question is tied to what would remain of the site that would be, are we clearing everything, reusing any portion of foundations or everything? I guess this kind of plays on Sarah's question a little bit. if we had another shovel-ready site, could you see the same amount on a new building? Or it's hard to tell without a site picked out, as you said, but, you know, like more of a shovel-ready type site.
Yeah, without understanding the needs of the infrastructure on a different site, it'd be hard for me to say on that. But I think the building costs would be very similar. I think you could take those pieces. I think there are some other nice things in the Learning Ladder. That structural building next door is newer. It's in really great condition. The parking lot was in good condition, so could be reused. There are pieces of the site that are nice. I also thought the original building, the bones of it were better than the addition that they made to the south. Just at the time they made decisions, they had their own. I'm not judging if it just was in better condition. That's why we suggested the addition renovation as an option.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The engineering requirements for a library are just, greater than what, we knew until we had you look at it, so thank you.
Any other questions for Sean?
Yeah, just one more question. The renovation addition, so the back building would get demoed, and right now it's 2 stories. So is the site work going to level that? I mean, is the idea to get it level with the existing building, or are you talking about some sort of elevation difference?
The addition renovation actually kept the basement in the second option. So there would still have to be an elevator. There would still, we're just going to reuse the foundations in the addition renovation to save some of the money.
So it'd be a single story, but you'd still have to go down. Okay, it wasn't really clear in
So
this.
it would be a 2-story structure in the addition renovation. It was going to be 2 stories. We're going to keep the basement, but build on the foundations. The problem with the building is not really the foundations.
It's the load.
It's the structure. So that's what I was planning to redo.
Any other questions for Sean regarding the report?
Yeah, thank you for doing a really comprehensive analysis on giving us 3 scenarios, too.
I appreciate your time, and thank you.
Yep, thanks, Sean. All right, next then we have presentation, discussion with the Assistant Administrator Finance Director regarding the proposed financial model for potential library project at the former Learning Ladder property. So Cameron.
Thank you. So back in September, the village board directed myself to start working on a financial management plan for the Learning Ladder site. Through now and then, we've gotten additional information, gotten the report back from Enberg. So as we kind of step through here, just a couple reminders. This financial management plan uses the same assumption as the village-wide management plan. So I took a slide from that document, again, kind of overall arching estimates as we're trying to estimate over a period of 5 years. So getting into the first scenario here, which is the rebuild on the Learning Ladder site, just for simplicity, all 3, while they're not exactly $8 million, we used an $8 million debt service schedule to summarize what that impact of the debt service would be. And 2 key big differences on the scenarios. A brand new building would be able to be financed over 20 years, as a remodel would be only financed over 10 years. So while the yearly debt service payments under the 20-year option would be less, the overall project cost of the $8 million facility would be about $11,264,347, as noted below. Similarly, this assumption, there's a significant event that will happen or likely happen in 2026, which is the closure of TIF District Number 5. As you can see, the assessed value for the village in 2026 is significant. We take a significant jump into 2027. So as we increase the amount of assessed value or the ability to spread the taxes over the base, that's where you see that relatively large decrease in tax impact. Similarly, I know we talk about in these financial management plan using an average home of $415,000. In this plan, that represents the assessment ratio at 100%, but also brings up the average home from the current at about 76% to the, so 315,000, mark it up to 100%, giving the new average home of 410,000. But again, still using the same apples to apples when we're comparing it. So in this situation, in 2026, we're showing an average tax impact of about $455.75 on an average assessed home of 410,000. As you can see in 27, 28, 29, and 30, steadily decreases with modest decreases in debt, slight increases and decreases to debt service depending on how we choose to layer those debt service payments. From a revenue perspective, with working with Cindy and the library board, you're going to notice that there's really only right now 2 sources of revenue, property taxes and interest income. There would be ability for minor amounts of miscellaneous income, vending machines, duplication fees. But for our purposes here, that wouldn't materially change anything that the board's looking at, so was not included in this analysis. So as you can see, a question or a potential question for a referendum in this scenario would be asking for, on average, I think this is 1,292,000. So if we would round this up, it could be an ask of a 1.3 million to increase the levy by. In the second scenario, this is the renovation. So again, the key difference here is we're going from a 20-year amortization schedule to a 10. So that drastically increases the per year debt service cost, with most of the other things here staying steady. So again, we peak here at the 591.78 and steadily decrease as there's assessed value added onto the overall basis. Some kind of just considerations here, and I do apologize for those who are in the audience. I will try to make this a little bit bigger, and that's not going to work. This is, again, in the packet information for those who are online. It's just some other considerations. So every year as the village takes out debt, we sit down with the rating agency and kind of lay out, based off of the capital prioritization plan and our FMPs, what projects are on the horizon. So again, S&P has not evaluated the effects of adding an $8 million general obligation legacy project. Additionally, has not evaluated what, because there is a debt and operating side, what the operating side would be compared to what our current reserve levels are. They do have an analysis that they would like us to maintain certain levels. This also may change some recommendation for strategy on several large planned utility projects. Typically, issuing revenue debt ends up being a little bit more expensive. It's about a 1% to 2% difference. We're able to issue debt at a slightly better interest rate with GO debt. The next note here, just expenditure restraint. The village currently, because we maintain a certain level of increase in our general tax levy year over year, the year that we would bring on the library service, we would likely fall out of compliance for expenditure restraint, which would result in a loss of that expenditure restraint payment for a minimum of 1 year. Again, the state hasn't come out with a final budget yet, so for all intents and purposes, we believe that program is going to continue going forward. So just wanted to put a note here. With the Dane County Library tax, I think one thing is really important to note here is, for simplicity's sakes, this model was built to apply what that Dane County Library tax would be that year. Now, if the library isn't open until January 1, 2027, and for the most part, why this was not netted in my first couple slides, this is just the effect of we meet the Dane County standards, we no longer are required to pay, or the county no longer has the authority to levy that tax on our behalf. And again, that tax exists to provide library service to village residents. So, somebody goes to Penny, somebody goes, the bookmobile. That's kind of what our buy-in to the overall Dane County library system. Kind of on the other flip side of the coin, donations and capital campaigns, just because of the drastic, the way that donations can come in, and there is a typo on this page. There's at the $1 million level, we could see about a $50 impact on the average home. The next point should say a $2 million capital campaign could have approximately $100. There's very likely that we could raise $1 million, we could raise $4 million. So at that time, when the donations and what we're able to collect is better known, we could come back and provide kind of better information on what that would provide in the form of relief. It is also important to note, us getting the cash up front on day one has a different cost-saving ratio than if we're spreading it over the course of 3 or 5 years. Again, the goal there would be to eliminate the amount of debt that would be required to take out and then reduce also the interest. So kind of 2 compounding things there. The next couple pages are just here for reference. Just because, just pointing out that this is the state and county apportionment form from the county. As you can see, it's made up of several different categories, but the most important one is there is a portion of the Dane County tax bill that is representative of taxes being paid for library services, as like I mentioned, the bookmobile, penny, and other library services. And then the 2 full debt service schedules for the 10-year example and the 20-year example. So at this time, I will answer questions.
So I had a question on the debt rating. So right now, our total geo debt is what, $31 million?
Yep.
Somewhere on there? And our debt capacity is about 70? So
Yeah, it's about 72 right now.
So if we go from 30 to 38 plus whatever happens with the police station, what impact is that going to have on our debt rating? Do we have a feel for that?
So because those conversations haven't had with S&P yet, it's unknown what that $8 million impact would be. I would say from their perspective, they're going to be hyper-focused on our reserves. And so if we add, let's just say 800,000 of operating costs, do we have the corresponding reserves to meet our requirements, or do we have a strategy to build up to that level of reserves? Again, the village board has a policy of 20 to 30% of annual expenditures. So if you add 800,000, you're adding exponential needed in reserves. They would likely want to they would at least want to know that there's a strategy if we weren't there.
Yeah, okay, got it. The other question is, so the expenditure restraint is about $100,000 hit we would potentially take by taking on the library. We would get a credit on the Dane County library tax, but I guess the question is, you talked about timing. So is that decision made January 1st, or is there a threshold, or is it prorated?
I don't believe, the question about the proration, I think it's an all or nothing. You either made it for the year or you didn't. Again, that's kind of the next steps here. And again, a lot of the reason why the figures in the front are not netted, we'll take credit for those payments as soon as we qualify. So right now we're collecting taxes, which is the 340, I believe, for the library. So we're collecting taxes for next year already. So my assumption would be that 27 would be the first time. If we qualified today or next year, 27 would actually be the first year that we wouldn't have that Dane County library tax. And again, this model shows that we are opening a library as of 1/1/2026, and I think everybody here knows that that's not going to happen. But for simplicity's sake and to show year over year what the cost would be, that's why it was presented in that way.
There's an annual report that libraries have to fill out to meet the, yeah. No, it's annual.
Can you explain why we used 415 for the average home for this, whereas we used 310 for the police station project?
So I think you got the numbers flip-flop. So 315 for
sure.
the kind of everything else, and 410. Because we're talking about a specific range here, 2026 and 2030, every year in this range would be under the new revaluation. So you're still comparing apples to apples, because in the other situation, you have a lower assessed home, but your mill rate's higher. And here you have a mill rate that's lower and a higher assessed home. Because remember, our revaluation doesn't change the overall what we're able to levy, it just changes how it's spread out. So again, comparing apples to apples, I believe you're referring to the FAQ police document. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So obviously, there's a lot of scenarios that we could factor in. We could raise $4 million. We could have another. We could pay for the whole thing with grants. We could. There's like a lot of different ways that we could slice and dice this. But in the most conservative estimates, when you think about reduction in Dane County taxes, which you have in the model, and then also the $1 million capital campaign, that's just the low end of what the feasibility study showed we could raise. And I'm happy to report later too about how much we have in contingent pledges now too, which I think the $1 million will be no problem to hit. And then also the consideration of the sale of the Friends land. And we can continue having conversation too, but they are willing. I think there's going to be, the turnover of that land back to the village once a new library is open, if it's at a different site. And when you start to factor all of those into kind of the financial model, and I know I had emailed the board to kind of a spreadsheet, the net tax impact to the average assessed homeowner in Cottage Grove would be around $130 a year.
Yeah, I think we looked at a situation that was between 130 and 135. Just want to kind of backpedal to one of my notes. Again, cash at inception of the project is different than with a spread. So I know that model would be how quickly could we incentivize and sell the Friends of the Library land. That would play a component in it. And I do think the $1 million for donations is probably conservative. I think there's potential to get exponentially more than that. And then we've talked about the innovation grant and other things. And so I think right-sizing this just will be an important step going forward. In a model like this, it's difficult, especially when the overall scope changes. So this is part of the reason that it took a little bit to get to here is I believe we have a good model here for a decision to be made. But just remember, there are things that could change, that could exponentially change what's in front of you. So as new information is obtained, we can certainly provide that information to the board.
How many funds we raise, how does that factor into the referendum? Because the referendum is going to be for operating, but people are still going to need to know how much the capital would cost. So we would need to tell them how much we've raised, right? Is that just an education campaign, or?
So the board is going to have to make a decision on how the question is going to be written. So the question can be written for, like in example 1, which is the building, asking to increase the levy by 1.3 million, would cover the cost of essentially the debt. Remember, capital is not exempt, but debt is. So it would be the subsequent debt and operations. Or does the board just ask for operations? My caution to just asking for operations is we're all under levy limit constraints. That will put significant pressure, similar to all village services, sooner rather than later. So that 1.3 is a maximum. That does not necessarily mean we would have to take that full amount. And then I would actually report that out to DOR every year saying, we had a $1.3 million referendum pass, we're only utilizing X or whatever.
And just a quick note on that question. So we have to certify the question for the referendum. Like if the board were to decide that way, we have to certify that, I forgot the exact date in January 21st or something like that. So once that question is certified, that can't be changed. Like that's the question that's going to be printed on the ballots. So at that point, it would become an education campaign if more capital funds are raised to show the actual tax impact. But you would still be going to the referendum for whatever amount you approve, if you approve any.
I guess my other question is about the expenditure restraint and how how that, it's because we exceeded the levy, but because a referendum was, the levy limit, a referendum was passed. So then we don't get that revenue back from the state because taxes went up even if
Yeah.
the voters voted to support that. Is that?
So less about exceeding the levy through referendum and more about, well, what was your impact year over year? So the state certifies approximately in September, October, what are allowable, or in order to make the expenditure restraint payment, what are allowable increases. Typically, it's 2% plus Wisconsin CPIU. So years like the last couple of years with higher Wisconsin CPIUs, our percentage or allowable increase is still set in that threshold is a lot higher. In cases where like it's a 1% Wisconsin CPIU, and we have that 2%, that we're only talking about being able to increase our levy by 3-point-some%. So it's just a very precise calculation. And so when I propose a budget or help bring a overall budget, that is very much factored in, saying if you have this, you'll qualify this. And then as things are added and subtracted from the budget, those are kind of the additional considerations at that point. And I guess I want to be very clear, that is a state budget item. The state could choose to no longer have that program. That program has been going on essentially since levy limits. So my assumption going forward is that they're going to continue that program.
And so that covers operating expenses, like
In the general
currently
fund,
in our
it's
general fund.
100% covering operating expenses. I just did the rough math. It's about $40 on the average home would be the impact.
And so then we wouldn't qualify that for one or more years.
It would
We're
likely
not
be,
sure.
depending on the ramp up of the library service, if it was passed, it is likely that we would fall out of compliance for a minimum of 1 year, maybe 2.
Okay,
It just depends.
sure. All right, thanks.
And again, the levy is one of many factors into that calculation. So if Wisconsin CPI comes in at 0.5%, and we're only allowed to increase the levy by 2.5%, but our allowable levy is greater than that, the village board may choose to increase the levy anyways to cover services. So again, that's one of many criteria.
Okay. Thanks, Cameron.
Yep.
I just want to summarize what I think I'm hearing as the kind of main points. One concern is we haven't planned for this in our financial management plan, so we don't know how this might fit in with the bond rating, S&P, those pieces that we haven't planned for it. It may take away from projects we have been planning on doing, the utility projects mentioned here. There's some revenue that we would be foregoing that we are currently using. The tax, the model that you have here is the biggest amount we would need to ask for in a referendum, the 1.3 million. Essentially, it doesn't take into account the capital campaign, the grants, any other type of revenue, right?
Correct.
I just want to make sure I captured all those main pieces. Thank you.
Cameron, circling back to the bond rating, did you have like a strategy in mind so that it wouldn't impact our bond rating or no?
I think so we got to remember how quickly this opportunity came to pass didn't really allow those conversations with our rating agencies to happen. And we typically do that, we'll touch base with them in March and maybe again in August. And then again, we were talking about potentially $2 or $3 million and now $8 million. So it's like, it was good that we didn't have a conversation with them about $2 or $3 million, because if we would have came back to them and said $8 million, that would have raised red flags, or likely would have raised red flags. Like I said, if I was sitting in S&P's shoes, it's not while the $8 million is important, I think based off of what I see in their tables and metrics, how are our reserves, what are our plans, how is this going to be sustainable? That's kind of how they look at sustainability of a business unit, if that makes sense. And I guess Sarah, I wanted to just clarify one thing. On the planned, there's a 10-year deck of utility projects. And again, not to say that we wouldn't move forward with them if the geo debt wasn't an option. We would likely have to consider revenue debt. Why we don't consider revenue debt like other communities is we score very poorly on the loans that we could apply or the revenue debt that we could apply for the state based off of the median income in Cottage Grove. And a lot of the times you score better on like blighted areas or addressing maintenance issues as opposed to kind of overall kind of increasing the scope of the system. So that is kind of where we're put at a disadvantage compared to other communities.
Any other questions for Cameron? All right. Next, then, we have discuss and consider a direction to staff related to potential library at the former Learning Ladder property.
I guess, Cindy, I know you sent a memo to the entire board. I guess I would go back to, haste makes waste. And we've hasted, I think, quite a bit. The site itself, in my opinion, is 1.9 acres. It's a triangle. It's a wedge. The 5-acre site, the Friend site, in my opinion, is a better long-term location for a facility that we're talking about. The fact that the original project estimate was in the $2 million range, we're 3 to 4 times that. When you look at our total geo debt capacity of $70-some million, this is going to represent over 10%. It's going to drive up, our geo from $32 to $40 million, and then we've got other projects that are going to be impacted. As Cameron said, when you look at utility projects, we may have to go to revenue debt, which is going to have all sorts of incremental cost hits to residents. So, my take on this is we take a pause and we look strategically at where is the right location, because I personally don't think this site is the right location. I think the Friends location at a 5-acre site is much better. So, that would be what I would recommend we move forward with in terms of kind of next steps.
I would disagree about the location. I think the Learning Ladder location is a lot better. It's a lot more centrally located. If we are able to make a path behind Community Park, it's going to be easier to walk. There's a multi-use path coming, make it easier for people to bike and walk there. So on that point, I think that the location's better than the Friend site.
So I do think there is a lot of value to the Learning Ladder sites for what Chris just said, and I think Sarah, you might have alluded to the Friend sites, and like the possibility of building the new construction on the Friend site. So I pulled the 2008 architect documents, and the road alone was $914,856 in 2008 road costs. So I really think that the Friend site right now is landlocked. It would require a significant amount of infrastructure costs to make that a usable site versus the Learning Ladder site right now that we have a lot of that infrastructure, knowing that a lot of it also has to be brought in with that water main. But I think that this represents an opportunity to present to the public in a referendum question.
Yeah, I think the total cost, when you say the road is at $900,000, even adjusted for inflation, we're talking about an acquisition cost of about $1.5 million for the Learning Ladder site. So I think you drill into the numbers, and we're going to squeeze.
Can you guys speak up, please? I can't hear.
Yeah, we're using the mics, so. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But I think when you talk about total costs, the $1.5 million acquisition cost is far and away going to offset the infrastructure improvements to the road, et cetera. So you're taking a 5-acre site and bigger possibilities. And when you say centrally located, where the village is growing, that's really a central site, right? So at one point in time, the Friend site was the ideal site where we're going to build this great library. Now we have an opportunity where it's clear that renovating the Learning Ladder or just remodeling it is not an option. There's other issues with the building. So now we're talking about demo costs and acquisition costs that will far offset any of those improvements necessary to build the right facility on the right site.
Well, I don't think we necessarily know that. We haven't analyzed, we don't have the true cost of what it would take to rebuild from the Learning Ladder site and stick it on the friend site, if that's what you're saying.
That's my point, right? You've got $1.5 million in acquisition, right?
Which
and
is
demo costs,
in
which
the-
don't exist up at the friend site. They don't exist. So you're talking about a significant amount of money. So that's my point. Haste makes waste, and I think we ought to take our time and strategically go after the right site, the right location. And I think there's so much passion to, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. And we've spent a lot of money up front doing the due diligence, et cetera. But I do think that there's two options on the table if it's build a brand new library, clearly. And I think going down this path of the Learning Ladder is one option. There is another option here, and we're discounting that. It's a much bigger site. It's over 2.5 times the size in terms of the site itself. And I think it's located over by the schools, and you've talked about, school-age children using this facility. To me, it's an option that if we don't look at it, we're not doing due diligence to the whole process.
I guess just on that, we've looked at the Friend site, and now we have another idea of, a smaller library that'll fit our needs for 10 years, and I think that, that's a much more financially feasible amount that we haven't really ever discussed before. There are also other sites which we haven't vetted. There's land right next to village land that's planned for the police station. And there are other sites in the village that are currently vacant, for sale, shovel-ready, that don't need the long driveway that maybe we haven't even considered before. Well, I do agree that it's centrally located on a main thoroughfare. We'll have a bike path in the front, has the park to the back. Like, those are all great amenities, but we also haven't vetted some of the other sites as well. Like, can we have efficiencies in maintaining the building if it's next to existing municipal, like a municipal campus and next door to all of those? And that's not as great of a location to access. So starting with not just renovations, but starting to build a new structure, we haven't looked at all of these other options. So, it's a different conversation than just renovating an existing space.
Right, it is. I agree with that. I think, but this is the property that we're talking about. This is the plan that has been presented tonight. This is the financial model for that specific site. This is introducing a new service into the village operating budget. This is what people have asked us to, come up with a solution. And, I think this board has rightly pivoted in how we are approaching library in Cottage Grove, and we don't have this. We are the largest municipality in Dane County that doesn't have a physical brick and mortar library. And this, right now, what's on the table, I think moving this forward and asking the residents of Cottage Grove if they're willing to, and taking it to the vote and making sure that they want a library, they want it at this location, is the right and most responsible thing to do. And we've obviously heard from a lot of people on both sides of it. And I think we have a strategy right now. And we've obviously put a lot of time and effort and staff effort and volunteer effort into a capital campaign and writing grants and making sure that we can do our due diligence and be as responsible as we can in bringing that tax impact down. And we're moving all of those things forward. And I think it's responsible now to move this process forward and to take this to the voters. And so my recommendation, after, I read the architect report 3 times because that's just me, but also listening to him tonight and meeting with him, I think the best solution to bringing library to Cottage Grove is a demo and a rebuild on the Learning Ladder site. So that's my recommendation moving forward. And instead of the renovation or the renovation rebuild. So going with, I think it was option 3. And then I think my second recommendation would be to have staff formulate a referendum question for our consideration at the next board meeting.
I guess my only comment was the original approach to the Learning Ladder was, oh my gosh, we've got a facility that we can get into very cost effectively. So it went from a couple $1 million to $8 million, which is a significant chunk of this village's debt capacity. And that's where I think, haste makes waste. And I feel like there needs to be an evaluation of that alternate site. And I know, Cindy, where you're at, you want to plow forward at the Learning Ladder site, and, I guess that's your prerogative. I think it's irresponsible for us not to take a look at the alternatives if indeed we're going to demo and build. Because up until now, demoing that entire site wasn't part of the conversation. It was remodel that facility and get into a library for the village at a very affordable cost. It's no longer that sort of project. It's demo and build. So we're going to build a library is essentially what we're going to do.
And I think we've been pivoting, and for the last 5 years, last 20 years, we have been researching this and coming up with a solution and reevaluating and pivoting and coming up with a different solution. And, this is all part of this story that is evolving. And I think, these are the options that were given to us tonight. And it makes sense to have a new building, a new library building. It makes sense to have the one-story building. I do like this centralized location. I do feel like it's centralized. I know that there are subdivisions over by the schools, and it would definitely, that land serves the grades 3 through 8. But I think that this central location also serves a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of senior centers, and is more centrally located in what could be the future downtown of Cottage Grove. And so I think that this is a really good, good project to move forward.
I'm in support of the library, and for a couple reasons. One, after hearing the architecture report, I feel more confident. I feel that that the infrastructure is in place in this site versus the other site. I also feel that with the grants and the campaign funds that would be raised towards this could be financially feasible for our voters. And I think we should bring it to referendum and let our voters decide.
I see the value in looking at other sites, but right now we've got this site that we have looked at, and I think the most responsible way forward is take it to the voters, say, is this what you want? If that's not what they want, we can always look at other sites in the future. But because we've got all the work done on this, and I think we should just, we're not approving $8 million tonight, we would be approving asking the voters if they want to do that, and I think ultimately that's the best way to go.
A couple quick thoughts. I also support the library and have for many years. I've been on the board for 6 years now and have been a supporter. I will say I went back in testimony, and in 2022 we had 19 people come and give us written testimony on why we needed the Friends of the Library Board to be the site, and many of the same arguments, the location, the bike path by schools. And so we passed a recommendation to have the location be Friends of the Library, and we stopped considering any other site. We had been considering other sites, we stopped. We heard, okay, Friends of the Library Board, so good. Then we heard in 2023, 24,000 square feet was the absolute minimum library size we could have. So those two factors, Friends at the Friends site and 24,000 square feet, was not financially manageable to put in the financial management plan. So right now we don't have a library accounted for in the financial management plan. It seems irresponsible for us to bring a referendum question when we don't know how it fits in the financial management plan. So I might suggest a referendum maybe in November, and I know that doesn't help this particular site, given the calendar that we're on with our offer with them, but under the current strategy, we'd be paying $2 million for the land plus tear down of the building and other costs associated with the site preparation. That's a lot of money for 1.7 acres of land if we're not going to use the actual facility on the land. That is a lot of money for a parcel of land. Seems like if we could find a comparable land of similar size, we could put that money that we would have spent on land into the new building. We could include these new considerations into the financial management plan. so that we know the long-term impact. I don't want to go to the voters and say, do you want this new thing? But actually, we don't know how it fits into our overall long-term planning because we haven't put it in. So that's my concern about it.
So I think in terms of, you know, in 2022, when we talked about the Friends site, the other site that was being considered was to attach it to a police station at the municipal campus. And I think that there was, for me at least, some hesitancy in combining a police station with a public building in terms of a library. And there's, we can go into that some other time. There aren't other sites under consideration. I don't know what other sites people have in mind for a library aside from the one that we have under contract right now, or option to purchase, and the land that the Friends own.
I think we haven't asked our realtors, we haven't asked the question. The village owns some different properties throughout the village. I just don't think we have asked enough questions to feel confident going to the voters and asking them to approve spending this money when our job is to do the due diligence up front to make sure we're asking the right question and that what we're putting forward is the best use of what we think the best use is for their money. And I feel like we're rushing through. We haven't put this in the long-term plan. $2 million is a lot of money for 1.9 acres of land. And those are my concerns. So the April referendum just seems really like we're pushing it through. To Pete's point, you know, when it was going to be a potential remodel, not for $8 million, that was exciting. But a total rebuild, we're not ready to put together even a question to me for a whole rebuild, a new building. We don't have a schematic. It just feels like really, really rushed, and we haven't planned.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you go back to the original plan of a 24,000, we needed a 24,000 square foot library. And I again, you've gone back, taken a look at it. So maybe for the next 8 or 10 years, we only need 12,000. But if we're building a facility that needs to meet the needs of this community, everything that was done in the past, the 20-year, we need a 20,000 square foot-ish building, right? And so you heard the guy from Engberg here tonight. He feels confident, but there's no guarantee. I've built buildings. I looked at that site. I know what the stormwater management plan is going to do and the challenges that site's going to bring. I don't have the confidence that that facility or that site could accommodate the facility that we would need long-term. Whereas the 5-acre site that's currently being held by the Friends would be a much better potential option for a new build. And again, as we went down this, my understanding was this was a remodel and it was more cost effective. So to fit it in the financial management plan, it was certainly a lot easier instead of now carving out over 10% of our general obligation debt capacity. I mean, that in and of itself is crazy.
So can the village realtors assess other sites between now and January 6th?
No.
This is really a concern.
No.
And I would say that as staff, we would need some direction tonight on which way to go, just because we do need to put the referendum question together. We do need to make a decision on the option agreement. So tonight is sort of the critical juncture for making the decision on how to move forward, whether it's, well, I guess the decision point would be, are you moving forward with the referendum in April? Because if that's the case, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done between now and April that staff would need to have that direction.
Is there a November? There isn't a November election in 2025, no. So April's the only election.
There is no?
No.
No, there is not. There would be potentially a February primary and an April election for 2025, but no November.
So then the next election after that would be if there's a February primary and then the next April in 2026.
Correct.
So if the 2008 roadway improvements were $1 million, I guess I have no idea what roads cost nowadays. I don't know if if staff have any idea of what that road would cost today. But then you also have the $500,000 if we were to sell the front site, that would go to offsets, some of the capital. And then in terms of earthworks, storm sewer, paving, additional landscape and planting was another $700,000 in 2008 for that site.
But those are gonna
I
exist
just-
in this project.
But to this extent, you're looking at a landlocked, the front site is a landlocked site. There's no infrastructure at all.
There's no land, I mean,
Well, you can't get to it at all. There's no road that goes to the front sites.
but there's an easement where a driveway can be put in, and that was part of the $900,000, which inflation adjusted is not gonna be $2 million.
I guess just to move us along, I'll go ahead and make a motion to direct staff to move forward with the referendum in April.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right.
Can we just get
Do
some
a roll-
clarification on what, we need a little bit more direction than that? I mean, what type of question are we putting together? Is it all-inclusive, or what are we asking?
Yeah.
How can it be anything other than all-inclusive? It has to be full disclosure to the taxpayers. So unless it's the full tax impact, we're actually bait and switching our taxpayers. So,
What about the one?
go ahead.
I guess I agree, all-inclusive. We want to be as transparent as possible. We have to give all of the facts, so the voters can make that. In terms of, the full question has to include the full operations legally, right? In terms of the capital cost or the debt service that goes into it. I don't know if we want to offset by the most conservative amounts based on the studies that we've done previously, in terms of a $1 million capital campaign, and then assume no grants and no other types of revenue. I think that might be an appropriate approach as an option for a referendum question.
And which option are you proposing of the three? Brand new building?
A brand new building. I think, it's the most accessible space that can reduce operations, that could even potentially reduce staffing, is a one-story building. The sight lines are important in libraries. It gives the village of Cottage Grove a brand-new library with all of the benefits of that, and I think that's the way to go with that.
Chris, is that what you need?
Sorry.
Matt?
Yes, and just a note for record that staff warns that this could impact our bond rating.
Correct.
And I think that comment, Matt, in and of itself would say that we need to include that we're going for a $1.3 million increase in the levy. And, maybe there's some language in there, it's gonna range from X, if you take the million in capital, up to 1.3 million. But it has to be full disclosure. Anything else is irresponsible.
All right, any other discussion on the motion?
Can we do a roll call?
We are gonna do a roll call. But I'm waiting for further discussion.
Yep.
If anybody has any.
This is, there are risks. This does not go without risks to potential bond rating, and we also have voters that are asking for us to ask this question and to let them decide. And they do elect us to represent them, and we have a lot of voters on both sides. Ask the question, they think it's gonna be a no, or they think it's gonna be a yes, but in the end, I think it is up to the voters on, what we can spend a lot of time educating them in the meantime, and we've hired a good company to do that. So I think leaving it up to a vote, I think, is the best course forward.
Yeah, Heidi, I agree with you 100%. I mean, obviously, there is a lot of risk here, and I think Mueller has to communicate the risk to the bond rating. I don't think that can be put into a question, but that absolutely has to be included.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call, please.
Dahl,
Nay.
Williams,
No.
Gage,
Aye.
Valencia,
No.
Cal Nelson,
Aye.
Stoa,
Yes.
Murphy,
Aye.
4 aye, 3 no.
Yep, motion carries. All right. With that, then, we'll move on to discuss and consider applying for a zoning amendment regarding the library parking. Aaron, I don't know if you want to give background on this?
I mean, we've talked about it before, it's just, do we
Yeah.
want the plan commission to look at it again or not?
I thought we talked about this before, and we were gonna wait till we got results of the referendum. That was the conversation, the discussion that we had, so I don't know how this is coming back up.
I thought we were waiting for the results of the architect.
That was my understanding.
I guess I'll make a motion to approve applying for a zoning amendment regarding the library parking to, what was it, one space every 250 square feet?
I think the motion would be just to have them reconsider it,
Have 'em
because the plan
reconsider.
commission
Yeah.
could come up with something else
Yeah.
entirely.
Okay, make a motion to do that.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'm just gonna repeat what I'd said last week or 2 weeks ago, in the sense that if the learning ladder is the site, this is irresponsible because there is no overflow parking. In the sense that this would be up where there is overflow parking to GDS or Granite Ridge, where there's other parking available, it changes the discussion. So I think it's irresponsible to take right now this to the planning commission and ask, because this is pointed directly to the learning ladder site, which personally, I think 250 parkings, or a parking spot for every 500 square feet versus 250 is absolutely unsafe, irresponsible, and a condition we should not be putting residents in because of the lack of overflow.
I'm sorry, Aaron, can you clarify if this, the ordinance has learning ladder in it?
No.
Is it specific to the learning ladder site, or is for libraries and museums?
No, it doesn't. You know
Okay.
that.
Okay, just checking.
No.
But I guess my point is, why is it being brought up right now? The reason it's being brought up right now is because of the learning ladder site. I mean, that's a fact.
It was actually brought up, was that last summer, when you were going through all of the rezoning? So, I mean, it just happens because
Ironic.
we are talking about libraries, and we have been since August, and that's why we're revisiting it, and we've asked Plan Commission to revisit it.
And we're talking about a site that probably shouldn't fit under that 500.
And then that'll come back when we have design, and we'll discuss it as a board.
I think regardless of whether or not the referendum passes, we should look at this, because in the end, it's good policy. We shouldn't be requiring people, whether it's contractors, builders, homeowners, to build more parking or, lot sizes or whatever. We shouldn't be requiring to make them build more than they need or want. So I think regardless of learning ladder, this is still good policy.
Again, this is for planning commission consideration. Planning commission can come up with whatever number they come up with to recommend to the board.
I think the architects also had a recommendation in their architect and engineering assessment.
Because we are considering a library, we will have a site plan, and that'll go over the square footage and what's in the site and the drainage, and perhaps we could delay having Plan Commission look at this until we have, I don't think whether or not we need to add 10 or 15 spaces or not is going to significantly alter a question that we would ask. So and we have to have a question written before.
Well, I don't think this
Commission would
has
have
to do
results
with.
anyway, so.
Totally. I
Yeah.
mean, if we can make a recommendation, once you have a site plan, that you only need 30 spots or whatever the case may be, that's a different story. But right now, the timeliness of it is, I think, irresponsible.
I mean, I agree with what Chris said, that this is a general ordinance that needs to be revised and to be in compliance with the surrounding municipalities, and that's why, I mean, that should just move forward within its due process.
I guess my question is for Aaron, capacity-wise, does this take a lot of time and effort to work on this?
No, I mean, the staff report's basically been done. Again, the plan commission can make a different recommendation that I have to write up. But the research was done a while ago.
All right, any other discussion?
Is there a motion?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. All right. All those in favor then?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstain? Motion carries. Next then we have discuss and consider ordinance 092024 regarding amending chapter 267 related to special events permit.
So I'm looking in the agenda link, and so the previous version of the ordinance is in there, not the updated one, so I apologize about that. But basically, I've amended the language to include the sort of exemption applying to all nonprofit organizations, and that the one of the criteria for considering it would be that the not charge an entrance fee or any cost to attendees, but participants would be you could charge like registration fees and things like that. So I apologize, that ordinance change is not in the packet. So if you wanted to see the language, we could postpone this to January 6th and then have, I mean, it would technically go into effect on January 1st, but then the new ordinance would come into effect like a week after. But one other thing to consider is, since the last meeting had some conversations with village staff, so right now we do not make any exception for the school district, and apparently they do have some events that use parks, like there was a regional softball tournament. So one thing we could consider adding as well is an exception for the school district, similar to Deer Grove EMS and the fire department, for the exemption to the village service charges. So they would still have to apply for the permit, but they wouldn't be charged the fees.
Can we suspend the ordinance until January 7th?
I think we could do that tonight based on the agenda language. And then we can get the finalized version back to everybody for the next meeting.
I guess it depends if you guys want to see the language in front of you. I'm good either way.
I guess the thing that I'm concerned about is there are people that are probably interested in how this is going to affect their event that they're going to start planning for next year, and probably have already started. So I'm not sure how we can communicate to them what they should plan for. Is there something, we're just finalizing some details.
Mm-hmm.
So is there something that can be?
Yeah, I mean, basically because January 1st, the event ordinance goes into effect, right? So they would be applying for their events. So regardless, they would still have to go through the special event permit process, and we would be lessening those restrictions theoretically after the fact, which wouldn't be having a negative effect on their event planning, is one way to look at it. So it's up to you on how you'd like to proceed. You could just delay the effectiveness for 1 week, and then we could have this all ironed out. Otherwise, having the infrastructure, the framework in place, and then just modifying it, I don't think anybody that applies January 3rd for a special event is going to be upset about the changes.
But is it reasonable to keep that communication open to potential applicants, such as, I'm sure the Cottage Grove Firemen's Festival is well underway in planning, because those kinds of things take a lot to plan. That those types of events fall into the new category that we've created, and this is our intent to continue. I guess I'm mostly just saying that for the record, that this is our intent to continue, because I know that.
Yeah, and if you'd like, I could just read exactly what I have written for the changes.
For the record?
Yeah. So, with the new section E, or 267.2E. So sub 1, the organization is a nonprofit organization under the Internal Revenue Code. So that's just broadening the scope. Prior it was 501c3s, I believe. And then section 4, the language is, the special event will not charge a mandatory entrance fee to special event spectators or attendees. However, the event may charge a fee for participants of the special event. Examples of valid fees include a registration fee for a run, a fee to register a team for a tournament, or a vendor fee. So those are the two changes from the last one.
My only suggestion had been to add the MGSD to the quasi-government entity. And then I did wonder if the special event packet was being updated at the same time.
We could, internally we can update the packet.
Okay. Because that's the most important part.
Yeah.
The most important thing to get out to the public is to make sure that there's a link with the, the instructions on what to do. And I think, obviously our wording is that you've got to apply 60 days in advance. So that gives, I think event planners time. And I think community organizations based in Cottage Grove that meet all of those requirements are very much aware of the changes and how that'll affect their event planning.
Yeah. So if you wanted to, you could approve the ordinance tonight with those two modifications I mentioned, plus adding MGSD as one of the exempt entities, or that's another one you could just choose not to do.
No, I'll make a motion to do that with the MGSD.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? All right, having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next then we have discuss and consider MadRep Livable Madison Regional Economic Development Placement Opportunity. We had this presentation last meeting.
Yeah, so Matt McWhorter from Livability was here last time, presented a whole range of options at various prices. We weren't quite sure what we wanted to do or where the money was going to come from, that kind of thing. So he directed staff to come back with a recommendation. In the staff report, it shows some of the ads we've done previously. We did it for 6 years in a row through the 2021 magazine. At that time, the CDA kind of redirected those funds towards other marketing efforts. I don't have a real strong opinion one way or the other. It's a nice magazine. MadRep's a good partner. They put it in the hands of a lot of site selectors and things like that. But I also, we haven't been in it for the last few years, and I think we've still gotten plenty of development anyway. So if we were going to do it, I think I would recommend a third page ad, which is a little bit smaller than what we've done in the past, but would be about the same price as what we've done in the past. I think anything smaller is just too easy to overlook. I think the big article that Livability was talking about last time, I think is probably overkill. If we were to do that, Cam recommended that 50% could come out of the TID 10 budget, 20% from 8 and 9 budgets, and the other 10% from the digital communication budget. But with that said, if this was something that was specifically focused on TID 10 or something like that, then we'd probably just take the funds out of that specific TID.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Any questions from board members, comments?
Yes, I think the rep at the last meeting had said that slots were already filling up, and I'm sure that was a marketing strategy to get us to discuss and consider this. But I think putting money towards ads where we're maybe going to be overlooked because of it's already end of December and they already have their publication slots taken. Maybe this isn't something we consider for the next year, but maybe the following year.
I would agree with that. I mean, we've gone a couple years without being in it. We're late to the game. Placement could potentially be less than optimal. I would say we should pass this year and possibly budget it for next year.
Do you need a motion to pass on it, or just no motion to act?
I don't need any motion, but from a budget perspective, I'm hearing that as staff direction to Aaron to bring maybe this back next year in the planning and developing portion of the budget as options that we can consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When, like Pete said, we were a little late to game, so we might not get optimal. When do they usually start selling those?
I think they reach out in the summer sometime, and
Okay.
CDA always kind of looked at it in the fall, and it was finalized around this time or maybe
Okay.
a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so I would just say we should come back to it in the summer and figure it out then.
Yeah, and I don't think we need a motion if that's a decision not to move forward. Yeah, I think staff has direction to bring it back.
For the following year. Okay. All right, then we move to new business, discuss and consider Class A alcohol license for Six Toes LLC. And it's the Cottage Grove store for licensing year July 2024 through June 2025. Lisa?
Yes, this is just a reorganization of a current business, which was Consumer Co-op, the Cenex gas station. So they had to reapply for their license, and they have done that, and the background checks were done, and they have been all cleared from the PD from that standpoint.
Any questions?
I'll make the motion to approve the Class A alcohol license for Six Toes LLC DBA Cottage Grove Store for licensing year 2024 to June 2025.
Second.
We have motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, then we move on to reports from village boards, commissions, and committees, starting off with Utility Commission. Chris?
We met on Wednesday, December 11th at 5 p.m. right here. We got an update from the engineer about the Ridge Lift Station, force main, and sanitary sewer project. We talked about a potential officer to purchase a portion of a parcel for purposes of a lift station. We discussed utility extension to the Houston Beacon property. Is that how you say it, Beacon? Okay. I lost my spot. Engineers reports, besides the Ridge Lift Station. West Lawn, developers installed some underground utilities. Corey Ridge Phase D, contractors planning to begin, it says plans to begin utility work the week of December 2nd, which was a couple weeks ago. So they will work until the weather permits. Amazon is still under construction. I think groundwork is going to start being paused because of the temperatures, but they're still doing foundation work and things like that. Whoops, I just closed out the tab that I need. Sorry, excuse me, just one moment. Director's report. We took some samples from MMSD for pollutants that were a little elevated previously, and they have returned to normal levels. And we were done after about 15 minutes or so.
All right, thanks, Chris. You're still on the docket here for Public Works.
Public Works also met right after at 5:30 on December 11th. We had a few public appearances. People wanted to talk about the Ridge Lift Station. We, again, talked about the Ridge Lift Station as it pertains to Public Works. Discussed the 2025 streets projects and the streets that will be redone. We also talked about for example, we talked about like Progress Drive, if we want to fix the radius on the curb for that intersection. We talked about the Wheeled Bridge Taylor Main Street intersection. There were 4 different options that were given to us. One with like a median in the middle to try to slow traffic down and make walking a little easier. One with like a road hump. Ultimately, we decided to put up a flashing light thing with like zebra stripes across, just because with the development potentially going in, that area is kind of in flux, so it's easier to do that and then change it later than put some stuff in and have to pull it out later and if we have to redo it. We talked about the multi-use path along the south side of BB. I'm trying to recall what all we talked about. We talked about putting in a fence, and if we wanted to cut down certain number of trees, if we wanted it closer to the road in some parts, or if we wanted to push it back to give some space for the people, so they're not so close to the road. And new business, we talked about agreement for operation of maintenance of traffic control signals and streetlights. And we talked about discussion for membership of the bike fed, but I don't recall that we didn't go through with that. We talked about, oh no, we didn't talk about sustainability goals. We punted that to the next meeting because we were running short on time. Engineers report and a director's report were largely the same from the Utilities Commission. And we'll meet next month again. And we got out at 6:28 just before Plan Commission started.
Do you know when this board will discuss the Wheeled Bridge Taylor Main intersection?
Well, we discussed it last week. Or this board.
This current
Village
board, the
board.
village board, sorry.
That I don't know.
Typically, what we've done in the past is our plans for the streets projects are shown to Public Works. They give recommendation to staff and our village engineers to move forward with the project, and then it's just reported on here at village board level. I can go through those options, and Josh Straga here, our village engineer, can go through those as well. One thing that was determined out of that Public Works Committee is that we will most likely make that portion of the project an alternative to begin with, as when that project is going to be bid in January and opened in late January, we will have a better idea of what's going on with potential future development.
And I think that my concern is that, and I don't know if it was discussed, like potentially pushing that project off a little bit, that the proposed development that'll eventually be discussed is over the course of 10 years, and that intersection has been a priority for the last handful of years and needs to be redesigned and engineered so that there is some safety considerations put in there. And so, I mean, I'd like to see that move forward rather than be delayed because of a potential development coming forward.
We did talk about, there was another option for like bump outs and stuff to sort of shorten it. The issue that some people testified about, there was a crossing guard, the buses turning, makes it a lot harder for them to get around there. And with a median, it's sloped, so it wouldn't actually stop any traffic. It wouldn't actually protect a pedestrian in the middle. So that's why we went with the basic option, just to have a little bit of visual cues for people. But I think it's something we can always go back and look at again in the future.
Correct. As part of the alternative, we're able to take that out of the overall project cost, and Public Works and Village Board will ultimately decide if we want to move forward with that portion of the project. It'll be separated out in cost of that portion for that intersection. One thing to note, Public Works did mention very specifically in the meeting that the reason this project came about, because it was approved in 2023 for the 2024 engineering budget, was specifically for the pedestrian safety, not any relation to anything else going on in that neighborhood. And so that's why they decided to move forward with the RRFB and updated crosswalks and ADA ramps to make that more pedestrian safe without putting significant amount of money, not knowing what could happen with that intersection in the future, as well as knowing that if there is any development, a traffic impact analysis would have to be done.
And can you just clarify that it is on the north side and the south side of that intersection is both being, will both have crossings, where right now it's only the north?
Correct. There will be a crossing in all four directions, and there will be an RRFB currently is planned for the north crossing.
So you said there were three options. This is the number one option that was reviewed with Plan Commission. I mean, I haven't really seen it, and I guess sounds like, Chris, you have. Where are we at with that? Is it approved? Is that we're moving forward and we're just waiting on timing, or is there still scope on the table?
There were four options as part of the Public Works Streets project. Josh is going to pull them up for me, and all four options were discussed at Public Works Committee as part of our 2025 streets project. So there's four options.
I do want to we have to be a little careful just for open meeting purposes, so I don't want to go into too much detail about this, so we can do an agenda item for the future. I just don't want to
Perfect.
go in.
Yeah, but we're just talking about stuff we talked about at the meeting, though. So
We don't have a specific agenda topic for this, so You can provide like an overview of what was discussed, but we can't like go into specific details.
No, that's fine, Rick. If
Yeah.
you think we should have a future agenda item, I think that's fine. But I do think the
Mhm.
design of this intersection feeds into the lift station conversation, some of the public input we got.
Okay, yeah, I just
So can
want
that
to
be
make sure
just
they're
a
related.
future, I mean, I'd like to discuss it at the village board level. Can we bring it back for the next meeting? Please?
Yeah.
We can do that. We can bring it back in January.
Can I add one other note? Because I sat in all those meetings last week. Can I, the membership for the Wisconsin Bike Fed, was that tabled? Or, I just note that it's in chapter 6 of the Bike Ped.
Yes, it's tabled. We didn't get, I have more information that I need to provide to the committee in January.
Okay, because it was in the Bike Ped plan that we approved in September, in chapter 6, mentioning that membership, so. Okay, that was my only comment.
All right, thanks, Chris. Next, then, we'll move on to Plan Commission. We met, oops. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a discussion. There is a discussion, consider the agreement for the operation of maintenance of traffic control signals. Recommendation out of Public Works was to go forward with that, and that's with Madison. This just formalizes the relationship we have with them. They've been doing our lights for a while. We just didn't have an agreement in place. So the Public Works Committee recommended that the board consider this.
John hit it on the spot. That's exactly why we have the agreement. There's just been no formal agreement in the past, and we met with traffic engineers recently, and there's a new Maine Madison traffic principal, and he brought up to us that we don't have an agreement, and he's standardizing that with all of the communities that they work with.
Yeah. Questions? Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agreement to the operation and maintenance of traffic control signals and streetlights as presented.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody, oops, anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, now I can move to Plan Commission. We met on Wednesday, December 11th as well. Started a little bit late because we got organized. We had a number of, we had a public hearing at that meeting. We had a lot of great feedback from the public and a lot of members of the public there in regards to the comments there related to not only the items there related to a proposed lift station, but also related to a concept development off of Ridge Road that was in front of Plan Commission, 2 different concepts in past meetings. But that wasn't part of the agenda, but it was related, and certainly there's a lot of public comment related to that, traffic and schools and a number of other things that were brought up at the meeting by the public. Before us today, we have 3 items related to the consideration of a regional lift station, addressing the property parcel of Tierney Lane, as well as the design and everything. So I will pause there and probably give a little bit of feedback or background on this from Public Works as well as engineering. And then Aaron as well.
Yeah, John, this is Josh.
Yeah.
Would you like me to just give a little background on the overall lift station, sort of like what we did with Plan Commission, just a couple minutes?
Yeah, Rick, that's okay, yeah.
Is that okay, Rick? Just to kind of give framework? Yeah. Let me share my screen quickly here. Give it a second to come up. Should be seeing just an aerial of the village, and I'm going to zoom in here to let's get a place where everybody knows Bakken Park. See, Sean, we're going to talk about Park tonight. And I just want to go over to Vilas, which is just up Vilas Road, the Vilas lift station. So the Vilas lift station along Vilas, just north of, I'm circling it there, just north and a little bit west of Bakken Park, is where all of the village's sanitary sewer flows to and is pumped to MMSD. When you get to the east side of the village, we can't get the flow of that sewer all the way over to the west side by gravity without having to pump it. This was planned, this has been in the plans for quite a while, to create a force main that goes from the east side all the way over to this station so that it can be pumped then to MMSD. When when you guys redid Progress Drive years ago, you buried a force main along Progress Drive all the way back to Main Street. So you did half of the force main at that time, knowing that you'd have to do the other half someday, which is planned to go through Hydrite, along Trillium, and then out to the east. In our case, Dentario Drive, and then out to pick up the east side of the community. So when we get out here and I show you the east, it's this east portion plus even north of Cottage Grove Road. So it's a large portion of the village as I sort of circle it out here that this is gonna serve. By gravity, it can drain all the way to the south. And from there, we wanna pick it up and we wanna pump it back over to the other station. So this project really has been in the works for a while. We've known that as development or if development occurs on the east, something like this would be needed for that to take place.
So this is strictly to support development?
It is, yep.
So without development, so like right now, there's no need to do this?
There's no need to do it without development today, no.
And so the alternatives considered, I mean, is this the best location for it if indeed there's development?
Yeah, we've kind of looked at that as a study area. Where would be the best case? So you can think about, well, you could have maybe a dozen of these to serve a bunch like 40-acre parcels throughout the village on that side. But the problem is then you take over maintenance of all those, you take over ownership of all those, and the cost of all those together, you'd be benefit just by just going to one station.
So if you move it further to the west and select a location within Houston Park, that's not an option?
It's not the best option, no. Nope, it would be deeper. It would require a deeper sewer.
So without development, we don't need to do this. So $6.8 million should be borne strictly by the developer, the TID, right?
I would let Cameron kind of go back to that piece of it, but he knows the financial side of it.
Yeah, so a couple things to consider here. Trillium lift station, while it's not at its useful life, it is nearing its useful life. So the last big kind of utility project we did was we evaluated all of our lift stations, all the wells, and identified SCADA, or the electronic system that communicates everything. I believe the number for just the SCADA controls on Trillium was something like 230,000. So again, that's just that component. There's additional rehab that's going to be needed to be done in the relative near future. So one of the things when we're looking at a project like this is we're breaking this project into bite-sized pieces. So if the total of the project is 6.8 million, kind of what is representative of how is it serving the existing users, and what is being or potentially going to be serviced with the new development. So kind of when we broke down this in staff, trying to identify how do we appropriately make sure the developer pays for its proportionate share of this unit. Again, realizing that there's only a portion of this lift station that's being serviced with the existing users. So while we don't have an exact number for this board, at a minimum, there's going to be $230,000 of SCADA work that needs to be done. We are not prepared with numbers on what additional rehab work needs to be done at Trillium. But again, this was more of a long regional plan on how do we best service that area of town.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Cameron. And when you asked the question, everything's served today, right? But he brings up the point of Trillium, which is this whole neighborhood here. And yes, it's 230. It's probably another 500,000 to maybe, I'm throwing numbers out there. Probably another 500,000 just to rehabilitate it. So it would be taking one of the existing stations out of service, a small station, which would be Trillium to serve that. And that is kind of right by Houston Park. It's close to there.
It's across from Houston Park.
It's kind of, I'm just showing it with my cursor there. It's a small little station that just serves that neighborhood. And it's a small site, so it's not like you can take all of even if you could reroute sewer to this site, it's really small. You'd have to redo a large wet well. It can't take the capacity that we're talking about on the east side. But in creating an east side station, we can take this one out of service.
So you're kind of looking kind of similar to the library situation. You're looking for a 40-year basically solution, or about 800,000 for a shorter term Band-Aid on the lift station over there.
Couple just high level figures here. So we were looking kind of three main legs of how to pay for this. So you have already collected impact fees that are in cash right now that can need to be used for ongoing utility projects identified that have a system benefit. So there's about a $1.5 million impact fee reserve available, and then approximately $1 million impact for existing users, which, based on the Trillium station that we've identified. So from there, we're looking to have future development contribute about $4.5 million towards the lift station. And again, we wouldn't move forward with this unless there's a notable enough project to start paying for the lift station. And also, on top of that, as Rick's probably going to jump in, is that this body doesn't necessarily decide the utilities projects unless it comes this way for a general obligation debt note. And also what's on the agenda is a zoning discussion, not the economics. So
yeah, so one thing, I guess a couple things to note. So the zoning itself, like the lift station is not guaranteed to move forward. Just because the zoning is improved doesn't mean the project is a go. Like Matt said, or like it's been reiterated, there would be a catalyst for the construction, which would be new development, and there would be negotiations with the developer on how the development is going to pay for the lift station, how the village is secured, so that you're not on the hook for any excess funds for the cost of the lift station. So another thing to keep in mind too is the village ordinances specifically designate the utility commission as running the utility side of village services. So the utility commission has the authority to purchase land and acquire land for its own operations. So this would be utility commission driven to buy and decide that it wants to move forward with this project. So the ask tonight is the zoning specifically about, is this, you've got some discretion right on the zoning decisions, but really the ask tonight is for the zoning amendment, the CSM and the site plan. But again, just because you approve this doesn't mean that the project goes forward ahead. There are still a lot of moving pieces that would have to be solved before the utility commission or anybody else would want to move forward with this project.
So if it's funded through revenue bonds, the utility commission has sole right to do it. So it's only if it's geo debt, then it would come to us.
Correct.
Right? But we're talking about approving a rezone of this, which, clearly the development, the traffic study, there's a lot of things that would have to be done in my mind before we'd even approve rezoning this. Now, I did see there was a timeline that we're taking this thing out to bid. It seems there's some disconnects here in my mind as far as what's happening and where we're at in this whole approval process.
Yeah, so the bidding is not binding by any means. So that's basically a proposed schedule if we were to get a developer to, have a concept that the village would want to approve and financial terms that the village would want to approve. So the bidding, obviously, that's not going out unless all of those pieces are put together. So that's just sort of a tentative schedule at this point. So we're only talking about the zoning of this specific 2-acre parcels. I realize there are other, peripheral issues right surrounding this because of you're building this for the future for development. So this is only the rezone on the 2-acre parcel. I just want to make sure that's clear.
I guess I've heard two different things. I've heard that Trillium is almost at its end of life and there needs to be a solution for that, but I don't know what
So,
I guess, what is that, how much time is end of life?
and
And then also, I guess the second thing I've heard is that, well, we're not gonna do this until there's a new development agreement, so I have a disconnect as well in terms of.
So we got two issues here. Kind of think about it, strategic planning on the utility side. How do we get the sewer utility ready for when we do have to make that decision on Trillium? Because the utility commission at that point in time, once that system fails or it's ready to fail, we would say this is the cost if we are gonna spend that money, or this is it time to bite the bullet and do this regional lift station? So by rezoning it, this opens up that option, that it is another option in the tool belt to move forward with.
And Josh, I don't know if you can speak to, or if this is not allowed, Rick, but the developer would actually probably prefer to do their own lift station. They don't really want a regional lift station. They would rather just do their own thing, but it's the utility that would prefer a larger regional system that would feed more than just, would be regional in nature.
I mean, whenever you can regionalize it, the cost, the later costs, the future costs are gonna be a lot different. You know, it's gonna be more manageable for the system. It's gonna be cheaper to maintain over the life of the system versus multiple stations everywhere. And we've been kind of going lockstep here and trying to just be proactive as we move forward, because we've been hearing from a lot of people as they have interest to develop that there is the need over there. Everybody understands this is a hurdle to develop east at this point. So the Utility Commission knows that. They've been planning on it. And like I said, they've already put money in the ground when they redid Progress Drive to start putting force main halfway there already, because they had planned on this as a kind of a long-range planning scenario years ago.
I guess, Aaron, one other quick question. So the actual use, do you need the rezone for using utilities in the rural holding district?
No, the intention for rezoning was just to make it more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood in terms of things like lot coverage and that sort of thing.
So based on current zoning, the lift station could go there?
Yeah.
So the rezoning was actually to make it, I don't know, more aesthetic or safer, or what is the rezoning offering? If the lift station can go there now with current zoning?
This is typically what we've done with other lift stations or public utilities, is match them with the surrounding neighborhood. I mean, we'd have to look at setbacks and things like that if the parcel needed to be a different shape or something like that.
Ultimately, I guess I'm just trying to understand, it's in some ways the best interest of the neighborhood to have it rezoned so that it can reflect more of a neighborhood feel, not, there's more rules with this current, if we were to approve this zoning. Am I right?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay. So by not approving it, lift station could still go there and we would have a lot less ability to say what it looks like. Yeah? Did I get that right? Yeah? No.
I mean, it would, yeah, we would have to re-examine it and under the rural holding zoning, and there may need to be changes made.
I'm sorry, can you talk one more time about why it should go so close to the residential homes that already are in existence versus perhaps moving it out further or being in a different spot in the future development? It's all gravity based, and this is like the only place that this regional lift station can go?
So it's a good question. It is all gravity based. This is sort of the low spot. As you head north, it kind of ground gets higher gradually. So everything wants to drain to this spot. Why wouldn't we push it? The question would be like, why not push it further east away from the homes, right? Is I think where you were getting, Cindy, too, is why not further east? And we're all the way east, and we're butted up against a 75-foot setback for a wetland. So almost all of this darker area, and I don't know if you can see that really good here, but where they're farming this field, this is all wetland. So carp seed, DNR, everyone else is gonna want us to stay out and provide that 75-foot setback for the paved surfaces, for the building. They'll allow the stormwater treatment to be closer, and we push that up to their limit of where they would like it to be. So we're pushing everything as far east as we can. The only way you would do that is you'd have to push this further north, up into this area, so you could go further to the east. But a lot of that's all highly developable land too, that people might want to consider it differently than, this is a spot that is not really usable down here to the south.
And when you go to the west end of Trillium Trail, you're saying that's too high? I mean, obviously that backs up to Hydrite. That area, there's a lot of space there, so there's possible that we could work with Hydrite and purchase a chunk of land that could house this station, or is you saying that's too high?
I mean, it would be higher, it's higher there. Yeah, you'd have to get the other lift station to come back this way.
Could you speak to the decibels?
Yeah, who just asked that?
I did.
Yeah, so there was a decibel question here earlier, and there was a decibel question at our plan meeting. I'm okay, Rick, to go into this, right? Yeah, okay, good. Just getting clarification. So I looked into that a little bit because I think that's a fair question. So there's three things in this lift station that will make noise. The first is the generator. The generator, there's going to be a generator in the building so that if there's a loss of power, because this is a regional large lift station, we don't have backups, right? So the generator turns on and runs. That generator would only turn on for a loss of power, and then it would turn on and be exercised. I think right now, once a week, you do the one over at the other station for about 30 minutes maybe. And you could work on when you would run that piece of it. The decibels on that are 82 decibels. But that's in a building that's going to have soundproofing kind of blocked walls. But there's louvers. So there's going to be a louver, an intake, and an outtake of air, right? One's going to be pointed east strategically, so it's not pointed west. The other's going to be pointed north, that it can come out of that building. It should be dampened at that point because it's in that closed space. Then there's two other fan units, two other exhaust units that are around the 60 decibel when they're on. There's one that's in the main piece of the building that just clears air every so often. That's pointed east, and there's one also that's in the generator room, because when the generator gets hot and if it runs, it lets out air the same way. That's pointed north. Again, nothing pointed west. Those are at about 60 decibels when they're running. Not running all the time. They turn on and off just to circulate air in the building. A residential, I looked at decibels, and an average residential, nighttime kind of residential space is about 40 decibels, so in residential area. Your air conditioners, when they run from 40 to 60 decibels, typically in that range when your air conditioners are running, just to give you kind of an idea of decibels. Now, the 80 decibels is like a vacuum cleaner, so it is a little bit louder if you're sitting about 3 feet from it. And then that will obviously dissipate over distance and time. Again, that 80 is inside that closed building. There's two vents, louvers that let air in and out where that's running.
But that'll dissipate some of that sound, right? So if you're saying 60 decibels inside the building, do we have a feel for what it is outside the building 5 or 10 feet away?
I haven't done that.
Because that's what matters.
Yeah, I haven't done that, but it drastically comes down, and we'd have to look into that further. It's another reason why we're putting up that landscape barrier too. But we can look at it more to
How similar is this to the Vilas Road lift station in terms of the ability to get this kind of data?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at that one. I think there's a little bit more noise at that one. It's a little bit older equipment. It's a little larger equipment.
Yeah, so it's not really comparable.
It's not. It's more efficient and smaller equipment in this station than there is in the other one. Yeah.
But the Vilas Road station is also pretty far away from residential areas. It's on a pretty big lot. It's up on a hill. I went over there yesterday and kind of.
It's about
snooped
200.
around.
I'm just saying as far as comparable decibel levels
Right.
at an X number of feet outside of the building, because inside the building doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
What matters is what is the sound level outside.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah. So in that one's about, I think, 250 from a couple homes, 250 feet. This one on the back side's closer to like 150, 180, somewhere in there to the homes. On the back side of those other homes, so it's a little closer.
It's like 100 feet closer. Is that what you just said?
250 versus like 180, I think I measured. So it's close to that. Yeah. So that's the noise level. It's not a continuous noise level. It's when those units are actually running.
I guess is there a reason why the lot is running north-south instead of having that lift station? You go into that little tiny cul-de-sac and have the building at the end so that you've got more egress to the residential part of that neighborhood?
So you mean on the east side of that bulb?
Yeah, so you've got the cul-de-sac coming in, and then the building is directly north of kind of the cul-de-sac, right? So it's closer to buildings in lots 14, 15, and 16 versus if the lot was to change so that you're at the end of the cul-de-sac, so that little strip of land would go all the way to the cul-de-sac essentially, and then you'd basically rotate that lot 90 degrees. We're talking $95,000 for 1.9 acres. We were talking about $2 million for something before. So I can't imagine that the developer or that the landowner Uphoff wouldn't allow us to do that at a cost, right?
Yeah, so the wetland boundary, I think you guys can see my screen, is right kind of at this spot. We gotta be 75 feet off of that. We're pretty much at the limit of where that parking and where the building starts here. So where the parking and stuff is. We can't go any further east unless we go pretty far north to get over to it.
And there isn't any sort of site work that can be done to remediate that from being in quote unquote the wetlands?
I mean, we can fill in bank wetlands, but it's gonna be pretty expensive and we'll need DNR approval.
Well, I guess the question is expensive is relative. You know, what are we talking?
We'd have to see if they'd let us do it.
I think the DNR approval is probably the biggest hurdle.
Well, but again, you want to do it right, and obviously it's butting up against 3 homes there. I mean, it's not ideal. I guess the other question is the stormwater retention is on the east side. Can that be on the west side, moving the building further over to the west, or to the east, sorry?
So all of the utilities, force main, water and sewer on that side that will run north all the way up the property. So like if you see the CSM, I'm gonna scroll north here. There's like a strip
Yeah.
of land there that's gonna be all the utilities that run north. So those come all the way back down and into this cul-de-sac bulb as a piece of it. So
The stormwater retention has to be to the east, okay.
yeah, that's where the site's naturally draining to. And obviously everything drains to that side and then to the wetland. So there's a little bit of just drainage pattern on that side as well. Yeah.
Josh, with a facility like this, the space towards the homes, I know that Aaron showed some trees and things of that nature.
Mhm.
Could we even build a berm or something like that on there instead of just trees, berm and trees? You can ensure that we deaden that sound as much as possible.
We could. I suppose we could provide barriers of different types, whether they're landscaping barriers or some sort of a fence potentially. You know, that would block view and also create some sort of a barrier.
I'm worried about sound. There was a
Yeah.
question at the meeting too about smell
Yep.
at the planning commission.
Yeah, there was a
and-
question about the smell and just the odor out of the station, and you know you're gonna have it's gonna be about a 30-foot deep wet well, so it's gonna be a fairly deep hole that's gonna fill up 10-12 feet and then get pumped down. So there's gonna be quite a gap from the top of it. It just has to be deep so it can serve long distances. But there's gonna be, as it pumps, there's gonna be a little bit of smell that's created. There is a standpipe that comes out and naturally vents at the station. And that is gonna have a scrubber on it, a little scrubber unit on the outside to just kind of knock odor down.
Can you talk about light at night? Because I think that was another concern.
Yeah, there was light at night that was talked about, and it really is only gonna be over the doors, so I'm gonna stop sharing here and try to share again. Just to show you maybe the building itself. I'm still okay, right, Rick?
Yeah, that goes to the site plan.
Yep. You guys can see the building now, right? So we're sort of on the south side looking north. There's just lights over the doors. So you see like a man door. There's one on the other side of these doors. I'll change views. As you can see, there's nothing, no openings or anything really here that's gonna make sound or try to reduce the sound that's pointed to the west. The backside has the louver for the generators on the way corner away. So on the side, this side over here is where the properties are in question. So we're looking at the north face of the building as we're looking east. So this would be the louver for the generator room. And then when I turn around to the other side, this is the other louver for the generator room and a fan that's on the east side. So there's not a lot of landscaping, but the idea, I mean, that's shown on this exhibit, but the idea is to put a lot along that western property line to create a little bit of a sound barrier too.
Yeah, I was asking about a berm because it's, you know, it's solid, and it's obviously not gonna go anywhere maintenance-wise and things of that nature, and then you put perhaps, as you show here, trees or some kind of evergreen thing, there's no issue with doing that with drainage or anything like that that I can think of.
No.
So, I mean, if we invested, if this were to go forward, be something I'd want to see just to, again, block that and block any sound that may come out of those louvers.
Just from a landscaping perspective, things that are funded by the sewer and water utility, there'll be a limit on what can be covered in the sewer utility. If like we want to do extra landscaping and stuff, just one thing to consider that might be general obligation and other no different than like a park improvement.
Yeah, understood. I think it's warranted here. If again, this is where it's going to be.
Cindy, did I answer your question on lights? So it's really just down pointed lights, 2 in the front and then around each door.
Right.
And then there's no other site lighting or other poles there. It's just a down face light just for access at night or safety, thoughts around the building, just so there's a little bit of light.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Light at night's an endocrine disruptor, so
Yeah.
I'm big in that. I guess, I don't think my question was answered, or I don't remember it, about why, what the Trillium lifespan is and why this needs to be, I guess, approved without a developer's agreement.
So a couple things. If there wasn't, this is more, it has to happen eventually. So if we didn't have a developer agreement, the utility commission may not move forward with and just put Band-Aids on Trillium until development happened. We would revisit. I don't want to put definite statements, but I don't think from a rate perspective it would make sense to move forward without development unless something happened at Trillium. But again, we might be 10 years out now or 7 years, and kind of putting it on the Utilities Commission's kind of radar that this is something that will need to be done.
So the one thing to note about Trillium is we are not putting SCADA upgrades in it to make it a full functioning lift station for the rest of our operations with all of our other lift stations in Wells. So as Cam mentioned, that's a $230,000 cost. The other thing that you don't see at that Trillium lift station is it is all submersible and there is no building associated with it. And so right now, if that lift station loses power, we have no backup power at that lift station. So we only have a certain amount of time before our staff can get to that lift station to get a backup generator, our portable one. So one thing that's not included in that cost that Cameron's talking about that would be a long-term cost that we do need to invest in Trillium is a generator. And that generator would be one that's not in a building that would be noisier than one in a building. Right now, staff operates all of our generators across the village once a week for 30 minutes just to service them.
So if there is a loss of power and you don't get a backup generator, all the homes in that area are going to see backups in their
correct
stormwater. Okay, got it.
And Trillium was built in '93.
That sounds right.
I'm asking, but that's actually it's
yes.
93.
Okay. Well, perfect. Thanks, Chris.
I was trying to set you up, but okay.
Yes, it was built in 1993.
Okay.
So, we're at a point we're talking about, well, when is it going to fail? It's at its lifespan of where typically you're taking out the pumps, you're putting new pumps in, you're looking at the whole electrical systems with the SCADA and everything. We're at a point now where it's time to rehab it. And then at the same time, like Kyla said, you should probably think about a generator or something there permanently, because you do have the issue of if a bunch of things happen in the village, who's going to get over and take care of that specific piece, right? If it can't take care of itself or have a little bit of belt and suspenders with it. So a lot of that's coming into those costs that we can put that number together, but it's going to be quite a bit higher than just the SCADA cost going into it, right? So it is an investment that you have to put into that station at some point, and it's ready for it. It's been 30 years or so. It's ready for a pretty decent upgrade.
The Wisconsin PSC, they define from an accounting perspective a project like that being 40 years. Now again, that's a 40-year estimate of a useful life. We apply similar estimates to roads, et cetera. A road, just because it hits year 25 doesn't mean it's gonna fail. It's just the estimate of how long that asset will actually be usable before major investments would need to be made. So I think that puts it at 31 years, so technically 9 years.
So if development weren't to move forward and we had this approval, like what is the impact of having this approval if we're not moving forward? I guess does that change that, like for the future, that someday if that ever needed to be there?
Yeah, it would benefit the sewer utility to control that land because the engineers have identified that as a low point for the logical place for that. So even if it doesn't, let's say it doesn't move forward for 9 years, that's the logical place. So obviously land continues to appreciate in value, zone correctly and purchase the land. For the sewer utility, that is the right move forward.
And like the approvals for tonight, so the zoning, that would be a permanent change. The CSM, like that's a permanent land division, but the site plan, I believe that it's good for 1 year. So if the project doesn't move forward, then 1 year they'd have to come back for a site plan approval, I believe, right, Aaron?
I believe it's 2.
2
but
years, yeah.
There was some talk of maybe adding berms and things like that. We have the pipe in the ground, we might have berms, we have landscaping, not part of this project, and maybe in the future, we'd be looking at a bike path through there. We may just want to draw that up and see what that looks like before we approve it.
When you say approve it, you're talking about approve this incremental landscaping? That's what you're talking about? Or
I think we would all want to see what that looks like on the site plan before we approve the site plan. So I would table the site plan if we were going to add the berms and things.
Because what's the ask tonight is just the rezone. So if and when the development ever happens, the funding or the financing, Rick, you said that the utility commission approves it, right? So at the end of the day, the zoning is really not required, is what you said, right? They could go ahead and approve it and build it. So how does so at that point, it would be revenue bonds, right? If it's solely approved by the utility commission.
Correct, and at this time, I would not recommend that direction.
It'd be a horrible decision, right? But they can do that.
Correct.
Okay. But again, it comes back to the prudent thing is for us to make sure that it's funded and paid for by the developer as much as they should be allocated.
Yeah, so based on Aaron's comments, the 2 asks tonight would be the rezoning, so from rural holding to SR4, single family residential, and then the CSM, which is just creating the parcel that the future lift station would be on.
So we talk about developer funded and then we talk about impact fees, and those are 2 different things. There are also impact fees paid to the water and sewer utility for each housing unit that would potentially connect in the future, in addition to developer paying. So would those future impact fees go back into paying down this debt, or
So the way they kind of break down, it's important to note, we can't double charge for something. So we would establish an impact fee that basically for the sewer utility counts as buying into the system. And that's key, especially in the planned future on where this would serve, kind of reestablishing it. Right now, the Utility Commission has asked us to revisit those water and sewer impact fees for the community to make sure that, because they haven't been adjusted since 1995. So just going and identifying and seeing, are we still charging the right, rates for different pockets of areas, and maybe be more micro-focused instead of just, the whole community, no matter where you are, is this rate. So this would essentially replace that sewer impact fee here. The water impact fee would still remain. At least in preliminary discussion. I haven't looked at that.
Yeah, that's kind of off where we are tonight.
Yep, and that's really why we collect those impact fees. Those impact fees are used to increase capacity to the system with the mindset that new development should not cost existing. So that's how those, you kind of come up with, oh, this is the estimated cost of this project. How do we save up based off of new parcels to get there? Same concept with the park fees for pocket parks and et cetera.
And I think it was touched on already, but with the impact fees, there is a deadline to use those under state statute. So when you collect them, I think they have to be spent in 8 years. I don't know if I've got the number right, Cameron, but it's, depending on what the impact fee was collected for, it has to be spent within 7 to 10 years. Otherwise, you refund it back to the developer.
And should this development or a future development qualify, the village kept TID 7 open an additional year for, to help with missing middle housing. So, should a development like this qualify with the ranges of housing units that they're putting forth, that those dollar amounts could also go towards reducing the impact of this project too, since it's benefiting the neighborhood.
And just to clarify, TID 7 is closed. So action was taken almost a year ago, extending for affordable housing, and then as of August 31st, 2025, TID 7 is officially closed.
Anything else from staff related to this?
I don't think so.
Okay, I didn't think so either, but I wanted to ask. Any other questions from board members or comments?
I guess, I'm struggling with, obviously, this is something that's needed for future development, but you've got the caveat that you've got an existing lift station that doesn't have backup, that services the neighborhood fine for the time being. And until we get to the point where we've got a developer, a development, a traffic study, a clear understanding of what the requirements are for that development to go through, it seems very premature. And again, we're not asking for approval to build it, but to me, that this is the precursor to actually building it. And there's so many pieces that are missing that, if this existing Trillium lift station has, 5 or 10 years left in it, it seems like that developer and the development and the traffic study and all the things that go into making sure that we can execute what this is actually going to feed is important, even though we have a lift station that's reaching the end of its useful life.
I agree with Pete.
I'm taking you out for coffee.
But I guess what's in front of us tonight, assuming per Aaron's suggestion that the approval of the site plan, we table that. That's the third item. Otherwise, it's creating a survey map that creates this new parcel, and it's rezoning from rural holding to single-family residential. Those are the two things we're being asked to approve tonight, and I don't think that either two of those things make it such that your suggestion isn't still valid and relevant and can still be the case.
Yeah, and the thing that I agree with you 100%. I guess before we actually would go forward with building it, there's so many other pieces, and I'm a little unclear in terms of what the utility commission can do, because if they just use revenue bonds, they can actually execute the project without having it come to the village board. That's the part that I struggle with.
That's correct. So if the utility commission wanted to move forward with this project without any developer contribution, it could under the village's ordinance. It's got the authority to do that. So that's, I don't want to speak for the utility commission because they have the interest of the ratepayers, right, for the sewer service. So if they want to have, the developer on the hook for a certain amount of those fees, or have, guarantees that the development fees are going to come in to help pay for that, that's all part of that process. But as you mentioned, the utility commission could decide they just want to move forward with this project regardless, if they feel like it would be in the best interest of the the community, which I'm not trying to speak for them and saying that's what they want, right? I'm just saying that is something they could do.
And then you have no input, as Aaron mentioned earlier.
I mean, they could have done that a long time ago, I
Yeah.
guess, if they really wanted to do it. So.
On the site, what it looks like, or trees, or anything like that. So that's a little bit why this is, I think, before us.
So is it possible to make this contingent on, I think that was a recommendation in there, contingent upon development approval, and in the process of approval of a development that would require said lift station, you would go through the traffic study and you would go through all of these things. And if the development then passed all those hurdles and satisfied, then this would take effect.
I think a condition like that would be appropriate for the rezone on the CSM. I think the CSM is just supposed to be more cut and dry, like their village ordinances. Yeah. So the zoning ordinance, I agree. Like that would be a valid condition to say, like, this is approved subject to the village entering into a development agreement with a developer. We'd have to think about specifics, and like no financial pieces have been agreed to by anybody at this point. So I don't want to come up with a condition off the fly. That's going to be bad, right? That's going to be impossible to say it's been satisfied. But basically, we could condition it on village entering into a development agreement that is satisfactory for trying to think of the best way to phrase it. Something along the lines of for paying for the lift station or something along those lines.
Is that something that we can table and you can bring back language that you would recommend for that?
I think that would be fair for the rezone.
But in the end, what does that get us, Rick? I mean, the rezone is actually to make it more aesthetically pleasant looking. They can do it now without us changing the zone. So I guess, to me, it is in the best interest of the village and the folks who live there to rezone it to single-family residential so that there are higher standards that have to be met in the case that they were just to move forward and build it. So I guess I'm not quite sure what holding and waiting for development gets us, because again, the Utility Commission doesn't have to wait for development before they decide to put one in. So it feels like we should use our authority where we can here to make sure that
To rezone it.
for it to be zoned at least to the highest standard we feel is appropriate, which I think is this SR4.
Gonna make a motion?
I'm going to make that motion.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm going to make the first motion of approving the application from the Village of Cottage Grove for approval of the certified survey map, creating the 1.98 parcel. I'm not going to read all the parcel numbers there. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion second in regards to the certified survey map. Any other discussion?
Just one quick question. So Cameron, is this $95,000 offer to purchase then being funded then after this parcel is approved by the Utility Commission?
The sewer utility
Yeah.
will consider purchasing the land after.
Because I saw there was an offer to purchase in the packet.
Yep, and so the sewer
Okay.
utility will have the authorization to purchase
Okay,
that.
got it.
Yep.
Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor then?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve the application from the Village of Cottage Grove to approve the zoning map amendment and change those parcel numbers to single-family residential from rural holding.
All right.
I'll second.
We have a motion second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. And then site plan we're tabling, correct? We don't need a motion on that.
Yeah, I don't,
Or do
if you wanted to, you could postpone it till the next meeting, if you would want to have a motion. Otherwise, we could just bring it back with the understanding that there would be evaluations of other landscaping and berms. So I don't think we're not dealing with a property owner here, right? That's like a private citizen. So there's a little bit more flexibility. So if we wanted to just bring it back.
I guess, Rick, do you think it would need to go back to the plan commission?
I don't believe so. We've already gotten their recommendation from the ordinance. So we've satisfied that requirement. So we could just bring it back to the village board.
Board members comfortable with that? Okay. Next then, we have reports from village officers. Village attorney, Rick, anything?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Then Assistant Administrative Finance Director, we got an amendment to consider.
What you have in front of you is a relatively lengthy 2024 budget amendment. Really, this kind of captures a couple things, kind of known events on the first section here, as well as kind of some budgetary decisions that were made in the 2025 budget process. So the first portion, or the general fund portion of the budget amendment, is purely recommending increasing the building permit interest income and various citation and fees to represent more reflective of actual. Typically, if you have, or best practice would be, whenever you have any material differences between what's budgeted and what's actual, it comes to the village board for approval. There's nothing statutorily that requires it. So again, this is a transparency piece. And then the kind of other one to note, TID 5. TID 5, the increase in developer incentive levels is more reflective of direction. So right now we have direction to move forward in getting the district closed by August of 2026. Again, so then that increment all falls back on the tax roll for 2027. So we had some incentives that were tied to interest that we were able to save some money by paying off those incentives early, as those developers had already meet their requirements for specific development. So I'm recommending that approve the budget amendment as presented. And then there is one more 2024 budget amendment that will be presented specifically to 410, 411, and 412, which is our capital projects fund, equipment and infrastructure replacement fund, and the public infrastructure plan. What I need to do in the meeting in January is come with all the expenditures that we've had for projects that haven't finished. So moving those costs into 2025, essentially authorizing the expenditures for those. Similarly, there's some things we bought in 2024 in the 2025 budget. So reducing that 2025 budget amounts for things that have already been accounted for, just to make sure that there's not a duplicate. For example, the plow truck, the squad car, we'd want to make sure to appropriately reflect that in the 2025 budget. But again, that portion of the budget amendment would come forward in 2025. So any questions on what's presented in front of you?
So we're at the end of the year, so the revenue changes that you've got here, those are all essentially realized?
Yep, and they're actually
So-
conservative.
Yeah, gotcha.
We're very likely going to end up a little bit higher, so I basically took worst case scenario, where are we going to end up on these lines?
Gotcha. I'll make a motion to approve the budget amendment 2024-006 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? All right, having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Next, we move on to communication Melissa's business, and first up is the approval of the vouchers. Any questions, comments, and regards to bills?
I'll make a motion to approve the vouchers as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Next then, we have correspondence. I think the village board had received a number of emails to all village board regarding the library, as well as the Ridge Road development, potential development. And those are all available for public. So next then we have upcoming community events. Anything noteworthy? All right. Then future agenda items.
I have
Go ahead.
I read, of course, the League magazine, and so I've read a lot about social media and open meetings laws, and I was wondering if we could just have a brief explanation about how board members and maybe how it applies to other committees. I'm not sure how we can communicate that out to other committees, but about our communications online, especially when we serve as quasi-judicial bodies, and I know there's a lot of requirements. So if we could have a brief presentation on that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've got like an introductory packet that I could share with other committees, and we can sort of do like a refresher for the board.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi.
I think the refresher or info on just what are the rules around referendums and what can the board say and not say and do or not do would be good as we move forward.
I was at the neighborhood meeting for the proposed development, and I was talking to a woman who asked that I talk to you guys about having a meeting for them to express their concerns. I told her I would bring it up, so this is me bringing it up. I don't know if that's something we want to do or if it's something that's going to happen down the road or what, but
You said development, what project?
the Ridge Road project.
I was also at that meeting, and I also had someone come to my house and request a more transparent, open dialogue.
I think if the board wanted to, you could have a meeting. It might make sense to wait until there's an actual application.
Yeah.
Right now, the village hasn't received anything. There have been like concepts proposed at Plan Commission, but nothing formal has been submitted. So I think if the village board wanted to do something like that, it would make sense to wait till there's an actual proposal for the village to have information on.
Yeah, and I think it would be a good idea for us to have the traffic study and have Strand's traffic people look at it, because that's the biggest concern that the neighbors seem to have, so.
And I assume open dialogue with some ground rules. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
The only other thing I have to add is the joint fire that's on here was canceled.
Okay.
So there's no joint fire next week.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Anything from anyone else? All right.
Actually, I do. Sorry.
That's all right.
For a consideration for future meetings, I think a topic on the missing middle would be really great for us to be educated on what the missing middle really is. So
Okay.
maybe from someone from the regional housing would be a good place to start.
All right. Item 11.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion. Is there a second? There's a second. Non-debatable. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week. These are all.
Did I fill it out right?
You did, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.